across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. We're coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and this is Talk, the home of common sense. But you already knew that already, didn't you? Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, always fabulous to have your company. Really appreciate you joining us. And don't forget, by the way, you can go to my YouTube page. I know we've got a Talk YouTube page, but we've also got a Julia Hartley-Brewer Show YouTube page. I know, it's so hard to find, right? So if you want to catch up on anything later, if you miss anything, I don't know, maybe you have to, I don't know, go to work, pretend to take a phone call on Zoom or something, I don't know, whatever. Do hit subscribe, and then you will never miss a thing. Right, quite a lot to talk about today. The news has moved on quite a lot, not just overnight, but even in the last few hours. President Trump announced that the ceasefire between Israel and Iran is now in effect this morning, a complete and total ceasefire, he announced last night. He urged countries not to violate it. However, there has been an exchange of strikes, not just leading up to it, but since, with Iranian missiles raining down on Israel. Iran has denied this, but nevertheless, missiles have hit Israel. At least 4 people were killed in a strike on the southern Israeli city just before the ceasefire was brokered. We will see how that develops. We'll keep you posted during the show. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer faces criticism after refusing to back Trump's strikes on Iran and being really clear, saying, yes, it was the right thing to do. David Lammy, the same as well. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch accused the PM of a lack of moral clarity after he refused to take sides. It's very strange, actually, because the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, was able to be very, very clear about whether it was the right thing to do or not. Oh, yeah, and it was. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has been accused of smoke and mirrors over a new £40 billion a year defence pledge. Today, he's going to approve a new NATO defence spending target of 5% of GDP by 2035. He's going to be meeting the Alliance's annual Leaders Summit in The Hague. However, many are saying that actually most of that money simply isn't going to ever materialise, and it's not actually being spent on defence or anything that actually keep our country safe. Plus, we're going to be talking to a professor at the centre of yet another free speech issue. Bristol University has been accused of failing to protect one of its professors after he was falsely accused of Islamophobia. By a student who hadn't actually even been in the lecture, in which apparently he was claimed quite falsely to have been Islamophobic. We're going to talk to Stephen Greer. He said the university failed to protect him, and he's warning about a chilling effect on freedom of speech in academia. We'll be talking about all of that, plenty more besides, lots more top guests, including Colonel Richard Kemp, the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, who's just been out in Gaza with the humanitarian food aid distributing body to find out what he thinks of that, but also, of course, where he is on Israel and Iran. First of all, though, let me introduce you to Tom Slater, editor at Spiked Online. A very, very, very good morning to you. We have an awful lot to talk about, and some of the biggest topics actually didn't even get to in that, some of those opening details. We're going to be talking about what's happening here, the Channel migrants who are just working illegally and delivering all our food, and everyone's turning a blind eye to it and pretending it's not happening. We'll talk about that in a moment. But in terms of the Israel-Iran ceasefire, Donald Trump posted yesterday, congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed by and between Israel and Iran. There will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now, when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their final missions. And he talked about this will be the end of the 12-day war. Overall, now, we know there were missiles until the point of the ceasefire. The claims of missiles since Israel claims that Iran has violated the ceasefire. Iran has denied this, even though there is clear evidence of missile strikes on Israeli cities. Goodness knows where they'd be coming from otherwise. What do you make of that announcement, that deal, if it is such a ceasefire? Is this a victory for Donald Trump's tactics in this, and indeed Israel's as well?
Well, it sounds like a cop-out, but it is almost certainly too early to say. I mean, we did have that big, bombastic, typically Trumpian announcement last night about how this ceasefire had been drawn up, that this was going to be the 12 days war, almost drawing a line under it, saying no more days, please. This is how far it's going to go.
He's the president for peace, not war, after all.
Absolutely. And it took a few hours for there to be even any noises coming from either the Iranian-Israeli side that they had signed up to it. They seem to indicate that they had. But as you say, already this morning, accusations of having broken it because of these strikes which have continued on. So it's one of those things where it would be very surprising if it entirely unravelled, but at the same time we're at that very fragile
Well, I mean,
point,
the war
I
is
suppose.
supposedly, the ceasefire in Lebanon, and there's still strikes on Hezbollah terror targets in
the ceasefire with
Lebanon.
Hamas as well unravelled, of course. So there's all these sorts of factors that could come into play.
Yes, indeed. Small matter of people carrying on firing their rockets. Overall, though, a lot of people, the great and the good, the BBC and Sky and all their analysis, everyone's saying, look, this was a terrible thing for Donald Trump to have done. He's igniting the Middle East. You can't do strikes on nuclear facilities. This will make things worse, not better. Same criticisms, far worse, of course, on Israel for taking out what they did of Iranian military capability. And yet, overall, what we've been seeing, especially when we saw Iran's retaliation, in inverted commas, when they hit some sites in Qatar, which, they warned the Qatar government, they warned the US government, they deliberately missed their targets. No one was killed, no damage was really done. I mean, come on. This was a pretend attack. They were desperate for this war to end. At the end of the day, there is peace through strength. People talk about, everyone has to come to the table and you can negotiate peace and we can just talk with people. These are Islamist, fundamentalist lunatics, and the only language they will understand is strength and power. Donald Trump and Israel have exerted strength and power, taken out their capability, maybe not forever for nuclear war capability, but certainly for a good long time. That is something that's a good thing, isn't it? Iran is the troublemaker in the Middle East. Good. They're now back in their box for a bit. Fingers crossed, it could be a revolution, another one in Iran, and they could be ousted and a sensible government gets in. I'm not holding out, for that, because it's the Middle East after all. Be careful what you wish for. But in terms of what was very likely, the prospect of Iran and the mad mullahs getting a nuclear weapon and their ongoing assaults and threats to Israel, tick, job done, I'd say.
Well, that's got to be the starting point, isn't it, of any of this? Anyone who's blasé about the prospect of this millenarian, deeply zealous Islamist regime getting its hands on a nuclear weapon really needs their heads examining. You can understand why
That's most of the commentariat in Britain.
It is incredible how blasé they're about, especially because of the fact that there was all these comparisons to Iraq and so on and so forth. This wasn't a dodgy dossier. This was the International Atomic Energy Agency who had said that they were enriching uranium north of 60%. They were clearly breaking the terms in which they'd previously signed up to, and they were clearly being very deceptive about how they were operating. Therefore, this is something that we should take an interest in.
The IEA is able to go and inspect what's going on, and now they did conclude earlier in the year that there was no evidence they were actually building a nuclear weapon. Apart from the fact they've got the rockets to put the enriched uranium bombs on, but no one enriches uranium to spending billions of dollars.
And you need 3% for power.
Nuclear power. Also, you've got quite a lot of oil. Probably not. If you want to have a nuclear energy capability, fill your boots. But you don't need 60% enriched uranium. And you know what you don't need to do? You don't need to do it 300 metres underground in rock underneath a mountain.
No.
I just don't think that's. I don't think that's
not
part
sinister
of the,
in the slightest.
I mean, we are talking about Bond villain levels of behaviour, and the useful idiots in the West are going, well, I don't think we've got any evidence of that. This is clearly a hostile attack. These people are insane. I don't want any of these people in charge of my country. Oh, look, let's talk about David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary. Let's talk about Keir Starmer. Jeremy Badenoch has said Keir Starmer has no moral clarity. And we've got this issue. Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, he's rapidly turning into the leader of Europe. He's just come from nowhere. He's really clear. Well, yes, absolutely. You can't argue it was a bad thing to get rid of this nuclear threat. Of course the technology and the people, the know-how still exists. Of course they can still go and get it. But I just find it utterly extraordinary.
I think especially because Keir Starmer has been maintaining this line that what we need is diplomacy, that what we need to do is get round the table, condemning, provocations on both sides from even before America got involved. Because I understand there are sometimes concerns when you kind of widen the theatre of war, you bring in the global hegemon, that's potential for things to kind of spin out of control. Hasn't in this instance, which is potentially to Trump's credit if all things hold together. But at the same time, he was kind of opposed to even Israel going in there. And you think Israel, we've talked about why you shouldn't allow Islamist lunatics to have a nuclear weapon. These Islamist lunatics also, if they had that nuclear weapon, it'd be pointed in one direction, towards Israel, who they've constantly said they want to wipe off the map. They see it as an abomination. It would be the fulfilment of prophecy, effectively, if they did so.
They've got a countdown clock in the main square in Tehran for when they're going to attack Israel. I don't know how many more hints they can give.
Exactly, the idea that there was no justification for it. And I think Keir Starmer, aside from the more principled points that we might make against him, he's also just ended up looking like an idiot, coming out the G7 saying Trump isn't going to get involved, and then he gets involved. Not for the first time, he looks like the kind of spare parts of
and saying we're just
affairs,
pushing for de-escalation, and then we saw a massive escalation, and the massive escalation is the reason why it would appear Iran has come to the table. Now, look, we don't know whether the ceasefire is going to hold or not, or Iran said we haven't agreed to it yet. I think that may just be a bureaucratic issue in a non-functioning country. But I'd love to hear from you. Donald Trump announcing this complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran despite more missile attacks this morning. What's your reaction to that? Does that show that what Donald Trump did and what Israel did was actually the right thing, bringing, let's face it, Iran to its knees? People talk about this as, these are negotiated things. They're not. At the end of the day, Iran's, lost its entire military air capability, for goodness sake, lost its nuclear capability, certainly for the time being, maybe at least another 10 years. I mean, tick, tick, I say. Thank you, Donald Trump. Thank you, Benjamin Netanyahu. They've made not only people of Israel, people of the Middle East widely, I would say the Iranian people as well, but certainly the Western civilization, they've made it a safer place. Thank you very much. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Get in touch. 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. I'm also desperate to get your calls on another topic, and just talking about it with Mike before we hand it over. But revelations, front page of the Sun today, that Channel migrants are working as Deliveroo and Just Eat delivery drivers within hours of arriving in the UK. Look, there's been lots of evidence that, in these asylum hotels, there's a load of the Uber Eats and the Deliveroo and what's the other one? Just Eat. All of their bikes with all the logos on, parked outside. And apparently it's just a whole big system. And again, it's organised crime. So you basically sign up. Someone signs up for a load of deliveries. They can sign up and get paid for like 40 or 50 people in one bank account. I mean, clearly, and then that money's distributed. These people can earn up to £1,000 a week. And by the way, all that time, you and I are paying for their accommodation and their food. Although maybe they get the old leftover pizza when someone's not at home, having put in an order. We know this is going on. I've never thought for a moment, people say, these Channel migrants, they're living on, £35 a week or whatever it is. How are they coping? Well, they're not looking too emaciated. We're not talking apparently Gaza levels of starvation, are we? I'm thinking, of course they're working illegally. Part of the draw. One of the reasons why the organised criminals take these people over, cut price rates. You have to pay them back with the money you earn from organised crime. So whether it's a delivery driver, whether it's car washes, whether it's nail bars, whatever it is, we know these people are part of the black economy. Not only does that economy basically evade tax, it helps organised criminal gangs, fund, their prostitution, their drug running, the gun running, everything, and exploitation of people. But also, of course, absolutely, as always, every single immigration policy, it absolutely damages people on the lowest job level, so the lowest socio-economic scale. Because why would you employ someone who insists on employment rights and minimum wage when you can get some guys just got off a boat? I mean, and this is exploitation on a grand scale that hurts British working class people the most. But don't worry, people ordering their Uber Eats on a Friday night, they get cheaper delivery.
And that's what the whole business model relies upon. This whole shift towards everything being able to be delivered to your door at not much expense, super convenience and so on. The way they've been able to do that is because of the fact that they've been relying, it's been an open secret that this has been in large part kind of illegal labour. It's one of those things where, in any other time, this is the sort of job that would be done by a teenager, and yet this is something which is now having to be made up because of the fact that they're willing to work for those relatively low wages. I mean, it's something that obviously builds up if you're particularly prolific.
If you're not paying tax,
I know exactly, it makes a big difference.
If you're not paying for your accommodation, it's probably quite a good wage.
And this is particularly shocking because it's one thing if it's they're working in a completely underground part of the economy, if they're working in a completely crooked, barbershop or car wash or what it might be. These are huge companies. They're incredibly successful. Everyone knows what's happening. Yeah. Everyone knows that if you allow your riders who have to register to rent out their account, that's just an invitation to abuse. And the fact that it's taken this long for any government, you know, the last government, let alone this one, to actually start talking about this issue. Yeah. They've already started talking about it before this expose in the Sun. It's ridiculous. But there are so many just sort of open secrets where this
issue exactly. And everyone just like nudge, but it's all cheap. But again, we know. Again, even like Donald Trump, you talk about immigration, you know, in America and California, a place like that, where something like 10% of workers are from Mexico, from abroad, and are illegal workers. That, you know, big business relies on this. Yeah. Big business relies on mass legal and illegal immigration to keep their own price, their own costs down. People say, and therefore prices are lower for us. But we're paying for it everywhere else. We're going to end up paying for it anyway because these people need accommodation and blah, blah, blah. But I mean, this is the thing. There is also a massive safety issue on this story as well, where, you know, when a young woman opens the door, child, when I've got friends who'll say, okay, I'm going to be on the phone to my kid while the delivery okay, you can open the door to delivery. I'll like tell the delivery driver, leave it outside the door. I'll give the code. You know, I do not want one of these delivery guys to see that a child is, you know, a young girl is opening the door. What? And now you're thinking, what, is a parent at home or not at home? They don't know. That's not safe. We know. I mean, by definition, we've already got somebody. If they come into this country illegally, then you're already a criminal. We have to treat you in a suspect way. If you've got a daughter, you have to work on that basis. We are talking about a very big risk to people, particularly young women.
I mean, it's an important point to make that if you allow for particularly a large amount of illegal migration, but any amount of illegal migration, there will be a non-negligible portion of those people who, shall we say, entering the country illegally won't be the only crime they're going to commit, that they're willing to commit that they might have committed previously. And this is one of those things. This is not to. This sounds like a strange thing to say, but this is not even to cast aspersions on all illegal immigrants, which sounds like a strange thing to say, but still.
Oh no, some of them are great in an illegal sort of way. They're all engineers and astronauts. You were almost selecting for a higher proportion of people who could be genuinely quite dangerous. We've learnt this through the number of people who've gone on to commit serious sexual offences, violent offences, involved in organised crime and whatever, because of the fact that they're already, by dint of the way that they came here, involved in criminal activity. So it's just common sense, and yet it's become another kind of unsayable. Another unsayable, exactly. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I can see the phone lines already lighting up on this. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Don't forget, we're all bigoted and xenophobic, and everyone needs to shut up and stop talking about it, because it's all about community cohesion and opening our borders to everybody. Because if you talk about this, you're definitely a bad person. Just warning you before you get on air. Just warning you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Coming up, we are going to be talking about Keir Starmer off to the NATO summit in The Hague. He's going to commit to 5% of GDP being spent on defence, although a lot of it's not going to be spent on defence. It's only by 2035. It's not really going to be that much money. But either way, we don't have that money. So how much are taxes going to go up by? Oh, so many questions that need to be answered. If only we could get a politician who'd answer any of those questions. We'll do our best today. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back and take your calls, whatever you want to talk about. But I can already see lots coming in on Trump and lots coming in on those channel migrants working illegally as delivery drivers. If you want to have your say on anything else, do please get in touch. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely awful, and it really does signal some of the significant tensions globally that we're seeing over the last few years. And now this has really broken out. I mean, this is significant. This is the first time we're seeing active warfare with the Iranian state. I mean, we're even seeing reports literally in the last 10 minutes of Iran and Israel announcing different government and military strikes to one another. Tehran has been in receipt of some of that as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:23 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me in the studio. And let's get to your messages coming in. Let's talk about what's going on in Israel and Iran first up, and some of the messages coming in on that on 87222 and at Talk TV. Robin says Trump has been played by Putin, Netanyahu and Khamenei. Wow, interesting, Robin. Wilfred said, I see Iran's reaction was to fire 2 more missiles at Israel. I suspect Israel's response won't be a ceasefire. Sean says, how long is a piece of string? Is like, how long will it last? And Edward says, Trump's announcements have been rendered useless by so many reversals. No negotiations, no agreements, and no dealing with him can mean anything. There is that. I'm not sure we can trust Trump's word. I'm pretty sure we can't trust Iran's word more. Jill says, Trump had it wrong. There is no ceasefire. And no one believes Trump anymore, says Benji. Let's see what Ray in Colchester has to say. A very, very good morning to you, Ray.
And a good morning to you. Another great day in the mad world that is Britain, and certainly the mad world we live in. But look, what you've got to say, anybody who thinks this isn't something that's good, I think is living in a completely different planet. In the last year, you've seen Israeli destroy Hamas. You've seen them destroy Hezbollah in some of the most amazing things ever. Also, the Houthis, all of them funded by Iran, who've been funding terrorism and threatening their neighbours in all the Middle East for the last 30, 40 years, and with that threat of nuclear weapons. And if you look into the history of what the last Obama, who sent them something like $400 billion in cash, you have the most ridiculous thing that Biden's done. Literally, basically, we've helped them, the last ones. And
foolishly, Obama thought he could trust anything the mad Mueller said, which was pretty crazy.
Yeah, if anyone was played, it was certainly him.
Yeah.
But what you've seen in a year, if you'd have said a year ago that Hamas would be destroyed, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Iran's nuclear capability to be wiped out, with also their vaunted air defence system wiped out, nobody would have believed you, and boy, I wish I'd put some money on that, because what has happened is a complete change of the balance of power in the Middle East. This is called realpolitik.
Exactly.
You can wander around basically holding hands, singing Kumbaya, but I'm afraid, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt has said, you've got to walk around with a big stick.
Speak softly, carry a big stick. And that's the thing. When you look at the Iranian reaction to the attack from US, that told you everything. It was on Qatar, where huge US military base. Warned the US, warned Qatar in advance, didn't hit the targets, no one killed. They went, and that's it. I mean, it was such a sort of, it was like being in a pub fight and someone just going, you and whose army, and then just gently tapping the person who's just punched you in the face.
If you're in the Iranian military, you've seen all of your top leaders wiped out.
Yeah.
And you go, oh dear, I've just been promoted. I wonder what's likely to happen to me, because I'm sure the Israelis have them on the list as well.
3 or 4 days life next, I would say, yeah.
You're going to be going, so, you know what? What's the reality?
You see, as far as you're concerned, you're saying unadulterated success? I mean, look, we don't know if the nuclear ability has been completely wiped out. It probably hasn't. I don't think you can obliterate it, but we know that's taking it back. Houthis are still firing, but they're not completely destroyed. But again, Hezbollah, Hamas depleted, no question at all. You would say overall tick. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The world has changed yesterday, and listen, there's probably going to be some missiles thrown and all the rest of it, because basically they're in a position where they've got to try and save some face.
That's the thing. Can I just ask finally, what do you make of Keir Starmer's response to this compared to Donald Trump's, and indeed, say, Friedrich Merz of Germany, who's basically been very clear that this was a good thing?
When it comes to Keir Starmer, whatever way the wind blows, I think is when it comes to whatever he
nuclear
says.
or otherwise.
Little or no, I pay little or no attention to any of his pronouncements, because if he says that it's raining, you can pretty well guarantee you won't need an umbrella that day.
Ray, thank you very much. The worrying thing is I'm pretty sure no one else is paying any attention to him, which is a bit of a worry as our Prime Minister. Thank you for that, Ray. Fascinating call. Again, if you disagree, I'm always happy to take on. We had lovely Salman on yesterday. I mean, apparently I'm just being paid to say these things. I don't believe a single word I say. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to Simon now, who is in Derby. Simon, you want to talk about the delivery drivers working for Uber Eats, Deliveroo, and everyone else, and who basically living off our dollar in their asylum hotels and accommodation while they're earning money basically on the black market.
Yes, good morning, Julia. I've got a pretty straightforward answer for this one, and it's dead simple. Apart from the fact that some of these guys must be using the Star Trek Blue transporter to get to these places so quickly, because if you've got 40 or 50 blokes or women or whatever delivering stuff, you can't be in two places at once. So if you're delivering a pizza at 8:10 in Manchester Road, and then there's another call coming out at 15 minutes past 8, you can't be doing it. Yeah. So the Just Eat people know, they produce a receipt, they produce a time receipt, and on the invoice that you get, and with my company that I use, they know exactly what I get invoiced for everything that I've done. I have an accountant that does all my work for me, because it's complicated, because the government wants to know where every single penny is why it's coming into your account, which is fair enough. That's how it should be. So all these tow rags are out delivering pizza, and they're not even paying stamp or tax anyway.
No,
so
exactly.
It's down to Just Eat. They know what's going on. They know you've got the account, and they know that you can't be in two places at once. So when it's delivery time, it's going to be between 5 and 8. It's probably going to be the most popular time. Well, yeah, tell me, you're going to be in two places at once?
Yeah, absolutely. It's that simple. And again, they know it. They're not doing anything about it. It's cheaper for them. And everyone goes, "Oh, I get a cheaper delivery." But actually, we're just fueling organised crime and the migrants wanting to come over because they know they can work.
Yeah, well, it's fraud, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely criminal activity, but on everyone's count, I would suggest. Simon, great call. Thank you very much indeed. Do you have your say 0244 499 1000? We'll take a quick break. Up next, going to talk to Colonel Richard Kemp. He's the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. What he makes of the Iran-Israel ceasefire. Also, he's just come back from Gaza. We'll find out what he made of events there. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:32 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me, editor at Spiked Online. If we go to our next guest, really interesting the calls, particularly Ray on Iran, basically and where we are right now, and basically we're talking about we are in realpolitik terms, and an awful lot of the commentary that goes on, I think, on all these issues doesn't live in the real world.
It doesn't. I also think it's living in the early 2000s, insofar as everyone's tried to impose the kind of Iraq war script, that kind of period when there was this very zealous pursuit from American foreign policy makers to, pursue regime change in all kinds of different places. That's a very different proposition to a nation which is menacing Israel, which Israel then is keen to take out for very clear, explicable reasons. Also, the way in which Trump operates, he's not an idealist. He's not someone who wants to impose his kind of ideology on any part of the world. It's very clear-cut, transactional, F around and find out type way of approaching things. And I think, regardless of where you come at what's going on in the world right now, you need to realise that the world has changed. It's not, we can't be refighting the old arguments from the early 2000s, as everyone seems desperate to do. Absolutely.
Always say we have to learn the lesson of Iraq, but apparently we don't have to learn the lesson of Syria. We didn't get involved, but there we are. Right now, let's go to my next guest, Colonel Richard Kemp, the former commander of British forces in Afghanistan, and has also just returned from Gaza. We'll talk about that as well. But Richard, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much indeed. What do you make of, I suppose, where we are? I mean, at 10:34 today, a ceasefire supposedly in place between Iran and Israel, announced by Donald Trump as a complete and total ceasefire last night. We've seen some missiles hitting Israel. Iran have denied they were from them. I'm not sure where else they've come from. But what do you make of what appears to be a ceasefire brokered by Donald Trump in the wake of those attacks on Iranian nuclear sites?
Yeah, I think the ceasefire, I'm not optimistic this ceasefire is going to hold indefinitely. I think Iran is more than capable of breaking the ceasefire. But having said that, Iran is on the ropes now, really. So in some ways, it's in Iran's interest for this war to end. So maybe they won't break the ceasefire. And I don't think Israel will break the ceasefire unless they identify potential aggressive activities from Iran. But at the end of this war, there's no doubt it's a very clear victory for Israel, and backed up by the United States. They've done huge damage to Iran. Iran has no strategic cards left to play.
Well, indeed, and it was interesting, so many in the commentariat, shall we say, in the political world, I would say even in our Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary, feeling very obviously anxious about this attack on the nuclear sites, and Fordo and other sites by America, and a lot of talk about how this was going to destabilise the Middle East, and goodness knows what could happen as a result. But surely the biggest instability is Iran funding terrorism and Hezbollah, the Houthi rebels, Hamas, and trying to build a nuclear weapon with which they absolutely were very clear they plan to use on Israel. I mean, did people not think that might be something to be concerned about?
They don't. I mean, Iran has been the single most destabilizing force in the Middle East for many, many years now. And that destabilization, its ability to carry out aggression against countries around the region using its proxies, is now ended, or at least for the time being. Most of its proxies have been knocked out by Israel. And Iran is really, I think, if anything, at risk of the regime falling. I think there's a strong risk of that happening at some point in the near future. But of course, our leaders in Western Europe, particularly including the UK, they can't understand the necessity to deal with a country like Iran in any other way than diplomatic means.
Why is it they can't understand that? Because one of the things I always like to do with these sort of stories is listen to the people who've got experience. I'm an armchair journalist. You're a real general. Military man. People who've actually been on the ground. And I'm always amazed by how many people, certainly in political world, who think that everything can be negotiated and that's how wars end, and everyone you can make an agreement with everybody. But just don't think that history tells us that.
No, it's far from that. And of course, war is terrible. And those people, I've been involved in a number of wars, and others like me understand that war is an awful thing to both be involved in and to witness. But there are some things that make war necessary. Some things are worse than war. And one of those things is a country like Iran, with a proven violent track record since its inception in 1979, the Islamic Revolution, getting their hands on nuclear weapons. That's worse than war. And unfortunately, I think many of our leaders look at countries like Iran and they see themselves in the mirror. They think Iranians or the Iranian regime thinks as we think. They don't. They think very differently. They will never negotiate anything that they consider disadvantageous to themselves. And if they do, they will never adhere to any agreement they make.
Yeah, small point worth making. Yes, whether we can trust what they have to say. Lots of people talked, and Tom Slater just mentioned this about, we need to learn the lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan, where you commanded British forces in Afghanistan, and we shouldn't be getting involved. And we should, a lot of Americans, not our problem, don't get involved. What do you think the lessons of Iraq and Afghanistan should be?
Well, I think we've seen the lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan being learned. Certainly the last couple of weeks, because Israel and the US involvement in Iran bore no resemblance to Iraq and Afghanistan, where huge numbers of American and a certain number of British forces and other nations were bogged down on the ground for many years in a war that they were really unable to win. They didn't really have the willpower to put enough force in to win it. Maybe they couldn't have done, but they didn't. But this shows, I think, we haven't yet seen the kind of full outcome of this war, but I suspect it will show that what we need to achieve in Iraq and Afghanistan in this case can be implemented without putting boots on the ground. There have been no boots on the ground in Iran, except for a small number of Israeli special forces. But I think one point to note, I think, is that the experience in Iraq and Afghanistan terrified and traumatized generations of politicians. Yeah. And that's why they're unwilling to dip their toe in the water at all for fear of being drawn into...
And that's what we saw with Syria when people didn't get involved. And Ed Miliband now in the cabinet, leading that vote in Parliament against us getting involved in Syria to help the people being massacred. Again, everyone cares about certain massacres, but not others. But people in Syria being massacred by President Assad. And again, we saw the growth of ISIS. And it is sort of... you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But I do think the lessons are rather more complicated than most politicians think. Talking about boots on the ground, we know, of course, IDF have got boots on the ground in Gaza. You have just returned from a trip to Israel and to Gaza, where I believe you were travelled into Gaza with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. This is the aid body taking food aid to people in Gaza. We've had extraordinary reports. Focus taken away from Gaza in the last 12 days, obviously, after Israel took action against Iran. But all the claims we see, day in, day out, that from, either medics who couldn't possibly have been at the scene because of the hospital, or by Hamas-led health ministry, that the IDF have been firing routinely, massacring, I think is the only word you could use, Palestinian people in Gaza as they arrive to get aid. And that people are starving in Gaza, and there isn't enough aid, and there is chaos there. What did you see when you were on the ground?
Yeah, I'm actually still in Israel now, but I visited Gaza a few days ago, and I visited the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation base that's distributing aid, one of their 4 bases in Gaza. And I experienced exactly the way it works, and it works very well. It's not perfect, but it works. It gets aid into Gazan civilians without being controlled by Hamas. That's the entire idea of it. Hamas have seized control of almost all the aid that's gone into Gaza up to now. And that's the way they've maintained control in Gaza. This is a way of preventing that from happening. But I certainly didn't see any sign whatsoever of the IDF when I was at this base. They're on the periphery. They're maintaining sort of wider scale security for the bases, but the bases are being secured themselves by the GHF, basically by armed American civilians. I heard nothing from any of I spoke to many Gazans collecting aid, and I heard nothing about threats from the IDF against them or attacks by the IDF against them. I heard a great deal about threats made by Hamas against them if they use these facilities, because Hamas hate these facilities. They don't want them to use them. And they've killed something like 8 local Gazans who were acting as staff at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation base. That's where the threat is. And my guess is if anyone's massacring Gazans anywhere near these aid bases, it's Hamas.
Well, indeed, what's really interesting is claim after claim after claim, often involving dozens of people being, having open fired on men, women and children, is that there's something like 1.5 million mobile phones in Gaza and phone footage of virtually anything that happens, and yet there never seems to be any phone footage of these massacres.
No, there aren't, and probably because they didn't occur. We don't know even if they did occur, but if they did occur, the likelihood is this was Hamas. The IDF have absolutely no interest in preventing aid distributed by the GHF. In fact,
they're organising it.
They're coordinating it. It's the most effective aid delivery system that has existed so far in Gaza. And interestingly, the two opponents of the GHF system, I mentioned Hamas. The other major opponent is the United Nations. They hate this. It takes kind of, it takes aid delivery away from them. They're still delivering a very small amount of aid compared to the vast amount of aid going in with the GHF. And the UN hate it, and they've been trying to shut it down. Yeah,
it is very interesting. Let me bring you closer to home here where we are. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer is travelling to The Hague for the annual leaders meeting, leaders summit of NATO. We've had it announced that all NATO countries are going to be required, and Britain will sign up to this too, spending 5% of their GDP by 2035 on defence spending, although only 3.5% of that would be core defence needs. The rest of it, basically, they can decide themselves. So we could say, we're going to pay Mauritius to rent back the Diego Garcia military base. We'll call that part of that, 1.5% extra, or a new third runway at Heathrow. Yeah, we'll put that in there. What do you make of that 5% commitment? Is it enough? Is it soon enough? And I mean, I don't know where we're going to get the extra £40 billion a year from, but your thoughts on that?
Well, our defences in the UK, and the same goes for other European countries, are so appallingly degraded that they do need at least 5% money going into them. But one thing I would say is whatever money you put in, whatever equipment you buy, you're dependent still to maintain a deterrent and make any use of those forces on political will. And that's simply not there among Western European leaders, including Keir Starmer, who over this latest operation against Iran was simply wringing his hands and complaining calling it illegal and objecting to it. And in fact, he's been so far distanced now from the US that he was unwittingly used as a part of Trump's deception plan. He came away from the G7 saying Trump's not going to attack Iran. Well, that message was clearly fed into him by Trump, which is it's the first time ever, I think, that Britain and America have been so distant.
I mean, he was duped. It's an embarrassment. It's a humiliation for our country, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, do you think that spending a lot more money on defence, some people are calling that warmongering? What would you say to that?
Well, I think, to me, the most important purpose of defence is deterrence. Above all, you want to try and deter war. You can only do that with military strength, and also political will, as I mentioned, but you need the military strength. And to do that, you've got to spend the money. It's not warmongering, it's the defence of our country. Obviously, if deterrence fails, then you have to have strong military forces to defend the country, and we simply don't have that. It's far from warmongering. It's an easy slogan to throw around by people who actually don't like our country and don't want our country to defend itself.
That's the worry, isn't it? Just finally, President Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine has arrived at the NATO summit as well. He's done an interview this morning in which he's talked about how he thinks it's perfectly likely that Russia will test NATO's commitment to Article 5 and, attack on one is an attack on all within the next 5 years, and we need to prepare for that. Do you agree with Zelensky?
Yes, I do. I don't know about the 5-year time frame, but once Putin's done with Ukraine and has kind of licked his wounds and had sufficient time to rebuild his forces and prepare again, I'm very sure he will attempt to take a bite at a country like the Baltic states, possibly Poland, Romania, which are all part of NATO. Yeah. And my prediction is, unless something radically changes between now and then, NATO will not come to the defence of Poland, Baltic states or Romania. I cannot see Starmer or any of the Western European leaders sending their young men and women to fight and perhaps die in large numbers for a country they've never heard of in Eastern Europe.
And that is the worry. Colonel Richard Kent, we covered a lot of ground there. So appreciate your time and your expertise and experience. Former commander of British forces in Afghanistan. He knows what he's talking about. Tom Slater, your response to whichever you want to come back on.
There's so much to talk about there, but it just is a reminder of what more serious times we live in, but what unserious politicians we're led by. Yeah. That seems to be a bit of a
That's a good takeaway from that. Absolutely, absolutely. Look, we're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to Professor Stephen Greer. He was driven out of Bristol University over completely false, made-up claims of Islamophobia. He's talking about the crisis in academia in terms of freedom of speech. He's up next. Stay tuned. This is Talk.
They put illegal migrants first, they put criminals first, they put foreign aid first, they put everything before. Oh, the father-in-law's on every afternoon, Rob. He gets more and more mad. It's a joke. Why weren't they shot for breaking into the Air Force Base? Completely with you, Rob. In any other foreign country, those perpetrators dead. It doesn't happen here because we haven't got any guns, we haven't got any soldiers, we haven't got any metal for the gates, the planes didn't work anyway. It's crap. It is true, though, mate. Somebody said to me on Wednesday last week, we are in danger of becoming a laughingstock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 10:51 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, we talk an awful lot on this show about freedom of speech and freedom of thought, and no place worse on this planet than in British and American universities. Well, the University of Bristol has been accused of failing to protect one of its own professors who was falsely accused of Islamophobia. Free speech and academic groups have asked for the Office for Students to examine alleged government and management failings that were said to have put Professor Stephen Greer at risk. He was hounded out of his job for, well, doing nothing wrong. Well, I'm delighted to say that Professor Stephen Greer joins us now. He's Emeritus Professor at the University of Bristol, although no longer working there as a Professor of Human Rights. Very good morning to you, Stephen.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. So what actually happened to you? You were giving a class, you were giving a talk in a module entitled Islam, China and the Far East. What was it that you did that apparently caused such outrage?
Nothing, basically. I mean, I had been teaching this module on a unit entitled Human Rights and Law, Politics and Society for nearly 15 years without incident. And the content of it hadn't really changed except being updated. Yeah. And in fact, there has been quite a marked increase in literature on these themes, Islam, human rights, China and human rights. So apart from adding the new literature, nothing really had changed. And basically, some anonymous students who were fronted by the president of the University of Bristol Islamic Society, a medical student who hadn't attended the course at all.
So he hadn't actually been there?
No. He claimed that the course material, not what I'd said in the class, there were certain things he did claim I'd said in the class which were false, but the course material was Islamophobic.
Because as part of this, it raised the Islamist attacks in Paris in 2015, the Charlie Hebdo attack. I would have thought a very obvious topic to cover in such a debate. And you were accused of mocking, vilifying Islam.
There were two separate things about that. One is I had said that the Charlie Hebdo attacks could be seen as an example of the capital punishment for blasphemy.
Yeah. Literally,
carried out by freelancers and mobs, as it happens around the world, particularly in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And I could have used examples of the Ayatollah Khomeini's fatwa against Salman Rushdie.
Yep.
That was a lot less topical at the time. And there are several states in the Islamic world in which capital punishment for blasphemy is enshrined in their criminal codes. So there's no issue. There's no real issue.
It's a perfectly reasonable and justifiable point to make. The fascinating thing here is that the student who complained wasn't in the class, hadn't been at the class, complained 6 months later, and apparently there's a 3-month limit on complaints. And it was taken very seriously. You were investigated for 5 months?
Yep. It was a very thorough investigation.
And what was the pressure like on you for that? Because did you feel that you were getting support from colleagues or fellow students, or were you allowed to speak to them about it?
No.
Did you face the sort of problems maybe like Kathleen Stock at Sussex University faced for simply stating, gender, biological fact on trans and women's issues, that she underwent a horrible campaign of harassment, rape threats, death threats, you name it. Did you get anything like this?
Well, I'm glad that my case is now being compared to hers, because I think it is very similar. Luckily for me, this was during COVID, so I felt reasonably protected.
Yeah.
There was a suspicious incident outside my home on occasion when Al Jazeera reported the controversy, and the university prohibited me from giving my side of the story. Yeah. So they had an open goal, basically.
So the lies about what you'd said, and they were lies. They were lies. Let's call them what they were. So it took 5 months.
Yes.
You were exonerated.
Yes.
But from what I can understand, the university was still sort of, gave a little bit of succor to the student sensitivities.
Well, nothing more than that. The university, in spite of my exoneration, which was in July 2021, the university took the module Human Rights and Islam, China and the Far East off the syllabus.
So they won.
Yeah. I mean, so the students got what they wanted in spite of the fact that I had been exonerated. So the university was trying to sit on the fence. And the university also said that although I'd been exonerated, they recognised the students.
Oh, goodness, sorry, that frightened the life out of me. Turn that phone off. Let's get. We've only got a couple more minutes left. Let's get you back on.
The university said they recognised the students' concerns, and they had taken the module off the...
Yeah, I mean, again, so this is the thing. So they win, even though instead of saying this was an outrageous allegation, I'm sure that was an allegation that could have been thrown out within a week anyway. Exactly. And these things take months. A lot of people have said you've gone through these sort of processes for whatever political views or views of any kind, that it's the process that is the punishment. What do you want to happen now? Because look, you resigned. You've left the university. You don't want anything to do with them. Although you still maintain that title for life, Emeritus Professor. What do you want to happen now?
The Office for Students, which is the regulator, has got to hold the University of Bristol to account.
Yep.
In the same way they held the University of Sussex to account with respect to the Kathleen Stock.
And they were fined a huge sum, weren't they? £585,000.
Yes. The same thing has got to happen to the University of Bristol, in my estimation.
I think people need to be sat. My issue with this, I'm not in favour of the cancellation culture and things like that. But at the end of the day, when people do this and they effectively hound people who've done nothing wrong out of their jobs, there needs to be a punishment, because they know that the punishment will come from those who are trying to hound you out. but there's no punishment on the other side, and they just, maybe there's a fine that's paid, but they don't pay the fine. They don't lose their house.
Exactly.
What do they care?
Well, I'm not going to dictate or speculate what the sanction should be, but I think it should be effective and it should be severe, and it should. The most important thing is it should send a signal to the academic community that this kind of behaviour will not be tolerated again, and that legitimate and lawful criticism of Islam, which is all I ever did, has got to be respected and it's got to be upheld.
I mean, it's just so basic. If only we had a Prime Minister who also agreed, that would probably help. Professor Stephen Greer, I hope you'll come back on the show. We keep up with this development. Emeritus Professor at the University of Bristol, thank you so much. Thank you for standing up for freedom of speech. Tom Slater, you write about this stuff on Spiked Online an awful lot as well. This is really basic, fundamental stuff. This is like Soviet Union, North Korea stuff.
No, absolutely. I mean, through Professor Greer's story or Professor Kathleen Stock's story, you just see that the whole point of university has kind of changed when no one was watching. Like, they have just become...
want to hear alternative points of view.
They have just become like woke madrasas, to play on his personal experience there. It's whether that's people realise that's where they're going, that's just every single time they give in to any student, any academic, any campaign group who claim that they're affronted or upset by
and
something.
Also the idea that, well, on the one hand, well, on the other, but someone was offended. I don't care. When a person says to me, I'm offended by what you say or think, and what do you... And this is relevant to me. Why?
And that's the other thing, even among students, without anyone really noticing, they have just completely taken on board this idea that their offence matters so much more than learning, than the university being able to run, people being able to have their jobs at the university. It's it's a real cultural change that's happened there,
we all saw oldies like me that, when they come out of university, they'll get a reality check at work. No, they've infected every workplace with it now. And I mean every workplace. If you manage to keep out of your workplace and you're a boss, please tell me how you do it. I'd love to give some people I know a tip. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You want to talk about Trump, you want to talk about the Deliveroo drivers arriving on those channel dinghies, you name it, get in touch. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. We're coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is great to have your company. And the reason I'm sounding so cheerful, of course, is peace has broken out. Well, sort of. Donald Trump called it a total and complete peace, ceasefire, but it doesn't look that way, certainly once it was due to have started this morning, I think around 7 o'clock UK time. We have seen some missiles that have been fired by Iran, Israel claims, into Israel. Iran denies that, but I mean, I don't know who to trust of those two. But anyway, it is, by all accounts, according to Donald Trump, in effect. We shall see how that plays out. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer has been accused of smoke and mirrors over a new £40 billion defence pledge. This is as he arrived at the NATO summit in The Hague today. Zelensky is also there. They're going to be approving a spending target of 5%, well, not target, a spending base of 5% of GDP by 2035. But is it really going to be that much money? And if it is, an extra 40 billion a year, that would be, where the hell are we getting that from? Plus, a Sun investigation has revealed that small boat migrants are working as Deliveroo, Uber Eats and other takeaway riders within hours, not just days, hours of arriving in the UK, while of course being housed and fed by you and me, the taxpayer. Thousands of illegal migrants are raking in nearly £1,000 a week by turning taxpayer-funded hotels into hubs for black market work on a Wild West system with the apps like Deliveroo, Just Eat and Uber Eats. We'll talk about that. I welcome your calls on all of those topics, in particular on the so-called ceasefire in the Middle East and, of course, those channel migrants. And welcome, of course, the input of my top guest joining me throughout the show today, and that is, of course, Tom Slater, editor at Spiked Online. Good morning once again to you. Let's talk, first of all, about Israel and Iran and that ceasefire. Very interesting conversation with Colonel Richard Kemp, who, of course, commanded British forces in Afghanistan all those years ago. And he seemed very, very, very clear that, you know, we're in a better place now than we were. And that whole, you know, speak softly, carry a big stick idea of, you know, you get peace through strength. And that's what would happen in Europe as well, dealing with Russia. Like, how hopeful are you that we will have a ceasefire and that we are going to end up in a better place than we were, say, 12 days ago when these attacks by Israel and Iran started?
I mean, it's very difficult to say, isn't it, given how much things have changed even over the course of the past few hours. As soon as the ceasefire was struck, there were accusations of it being broken. That's not uncommon. Yeah. But we shall see in the coming days and weeks how this settles down. We will also see, excuse me, in the coming days and weeks, how much damage has actually been inflicted on the Iranian nuclear programme.
Because we still don't know. Donald Trump has said it's all obliterated. There's question marks about how much material was actually removed before the strikes.
Exactly, because, you know, contrary to some of the commentators in the West, they're quite deceptive about how they have this material, where they
you mean we
can't
around. Trust what the mullahs of Iran say?
Exactly, they're not as big fans of transparency as some people in the international kind of human rights blob might believe them to be. So all of that will come out in the wash. I mean, it was clear that certainly Israel was absolutely justified in going in, given the fact that they were being menaced by Iran, the fact that there was this report which had showed they were enriching uranium up until that point. We can only hope that at the very least that those stockpiles, both ballistic missiles and also the uranium enrichment, has been so severely degraded that if nothing else, it's pushed things back a fair amount. But as ever, there's a lot of unknown potential things that we're going to learn, but also consequences from what.
Well, there are, but again, it's a lot of people, the commentary basically saying, "Oh, this could have, you know, this could turn out badly." This is, you know, I mean, they're absolutely horrified by the thought of an all-out war, but also pretty unhappy about a ceasefire too, because this kind of proves that Donald Trump, when he wants to act, when America uses its might in a strategic, clear way to achieve a specific aim, it works really, really well. And this idea that, oh well, things could, you know, escalate out of control. What? Unlike Iran, a completely lunatic Islamist fascist government having a nuclear weapon. You don't think there's any risk of that escalating out of control? Have you been watching the news for the last 20 years as they fund terrorism around the Middle East? And here in Britain as well, funding Hamas, funding Hezbollah. I mean, it's almost like they're blind to this.
And also, I don't even buy that what they're primarily concerned about is escalation per se. I mean, that's always a concern. There are always risks in terms of any military action which any state engages in, and you know that talking to the many kind of former military figures that you've had on the show. These are people who are not gung-ho about going into certain courses of action. But what I'm so fascinated by is how, as you've already hinted at, how uninterested they have been in the escalation that's been taking place on the Iranian side for very long. The fact that they've been funding proxies that have been encircling Israel, menacing it, killing its people for many, many years. The fact that it constantly says death to America and death to Israel, the big Satan and the little Satan. The fact that
we're on the list.
Continue to export and fund terror, that for all this talk about, Iran being the victim of kind of American imperialism, that it's been extending its own kind of imperial writ across the Middle East, moving into Iraq after Iraq.
That's just fine. But it's even...
There's this idea that only the West acts, everyone else reacts.
Yeah.
And I think that's
and they're all victims. But again, I've had people say, this is violation of international law, this is a sovereign nation state. I mean, sod off.
But also,
I mean, again, what a load of abject nonsense.
But also, this is, if you're attacked by another sovereign nation state, as Israel has been, via these proxies, then you're entitled to fight back.
This is not about via the proxies.
Again, this idea that it was unprovoked is just nonsense, unless you think...
wait a minute, I want to clarify. You remember, another thing that was unprovoked, of course, was Israel's attack on Gaza, because when Hamas attacked Israel, that was as a result of years of provocation and, occupation and the like. So that somehow by the left been justified, and the supposedly moderates has somehow been justified. And Hamas rockets right now into Israel, justified because of provocation. But Iran firing, funding Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi rebels, and their own attacks on Israel, that doesn't justify the response. I don't know how these people, A, sleep at night, B, how they can just... we are in Orwellian doublethink of what is right and what is wrong.
No, absolutely, and it's gotten to the point where to defend yourself is considered a war crime, a form of Western imperialism. All of this is complete nonsense. And if anything, if you think about the way in which Israel has, over many years, responded to these proxies, particularly in Gaza and in southern Lebanon, in the form of Hezbollah and Hamas, is that obviously there have been wars periodically, there have been periods of conflict, but there have also been significant restraint of just holding back, hunkering down, building the Iron Dome, intercepting rockets. Could you imagine another country who would have to, because of the pressures of international opinion, which had turned so sour against you, that rather than dealing with the places and the individuals who are firing rockets into your territory periodically, you basically just have to create a kind of force field to stop them from getting in as much as possible.
Because that seems like the normal reaction, or you could just try and stop it from happening.
That was what was unusual, not the fact that they went in there to try and deal with those threats when it became clear that they could not be tolerated anymore. Absolutely.
Again, the doublethink on this issue is extraordinary. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. But also, you can send us a message on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. In an hour's time, we're going to be talking to the brilliant lawyer Natasha Hausdorff about the legality of all this and where we are on all of those stories, and also just why every man and his dogs apparently feels the need, whether it's celebrities or the British Medical Association, which last time I looked was supposed to be a doctors' union, apparently has a view on Gaza and Israel. Why? I don't understand. We'll talk about all of that. Let's also talk about these small boat migrants, because again, this is another one of those topics where there is this amazing doublethink. So this is a story, front page of the Sun today, where basically you've got small boat migrants arriving in this country, having paid their people smugglers. Apparently the going rate's $1,500. Isn't capitalism and the free market a wonderful thing? How that price has gone down from $5,000 down to $1,500. Bigger boats, getting people on. Basically got on average about 500 a day coming over. I don't know what the weather's like today in terms of the numbers we're going to get, but the gangs have not been smashed. The boats have not been stopped, whoever's in charge. But channel migrants basically in these asylum hotels, which have basically been turned into hubs for illegal working as delivery drivers. So whether it's Deliveroo, whether it's Just Eat or Uber Eats, those bikes are parked outside. An address will be registered, a telephone number, an account, and basically these apps are allowing people to register and get cleared. Yes, I've got a passport, I'm legal to work, blah, 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 and they get cleared to work. But they are allowed to effectively sort of sublet their licence to be a driver or a moped rider for these companies. And And sometimes we've got 40 people in an asylum hotel working and doing this job. There is not only are we talking about what the hell are we doing funding people's accommodation and lifestyle when they're earning $1,000 a week. It's completely illegal black market working to all intents and purposes. These people are not going to be registered paying tax. They can't be. The companies must know it's going on because they can see that 40 people are working on the same license at any one time. There is a risk to customers, particularly young women who answer the door to somebody who is already a criminal, by the way. They're already a criminal because they've arrived here illegally. That's a definition. And this whole thing is an absolute outrage and quite obvious that everyone involved knows it is. And no one's done anything.
No, absolutely. And it's just one of those many open secrets that we have where legal migration is concerned, and also where this interacts with big companies. We talk a lot about the black market companies, which are really kind of operating in the shadows, out of the view of the taxman, out of the view of the authorities and so on. These are huge, successful businesses, and they've built a business model which relies on paying people, regardless of whether they're coming illegally or not, a pittance effectively, and because of the fact that it keeps the prices down, it means more people are going to use the app, all the rest of it. So it's just a really corrupt from top to bottom kind of business model, morally, if not actually sort of legally, shall we say. And now on the legal side, it's been called into account. If you read this Sun expose, it took them minutes to find one of these accounts that you can just rent from someone. Why the hell, if you've got all these checks in place for someone who signs up to have that account with Deliveroo or whatever else, why would you allow them to rent it out? They know
to any Tom, Dick or Harry.
At the very least, we can say
Mohammed
that someone will have alerted them to this already. So it's insane that it's taken this long for any attention to be paid.
Well, exactly. So they know it's happening. And also, again, we've always got the issue about market. And people go, oh, well, at least it's cheap. Sometimes you order one of these delivery companies and it's sort of, it's delivery's only like £1.30, and it's because they've had to cut the delivery because people haven't got enough money anymore and they're not sitting at home in lockdown and just ordering all the food. It's an incredibly expensive way of eating for good. Walk to the supermarket, you lazy sods, for goodness me. But also, it massively hurts people on the lower end of the income scale.
Yeah.
This is basically very low-paid, unskilled work. Again, you mentioned earlier, it's sort of jobs teenagers used to be able to do. Well, no, not anymore, because these jobs are all being taken up this way. But also, it means that people who are unable to get any other kind of jobs are having to compete with illegal workers whose entire accommodation costs are paid. Well, then you're willing to work for less, aren't you? Because you can. This is just such a scam. But the thing about this is, of course, somehow the moderate, the right-ons, the Islington dinner party people, they're not that bothered about this. Well, at least they're working. Well, they'll say to people like me, well, yeah, you had a problem with these people scamming. You say, we think they should be allowed to work. Oh, yeah. Let's make it easier for people to come here. Why don't we literally just provide a ferry service for these people and have done with it? But at the same time, not understanding the threat and the damage to ordinary working class people, the risk to any particularly young women answering the door, or elderly people answering the door to people who are already criminals, not supposed to be here, big question marks. But one of the things, it ties into me with another story that's in the papers today about a Qatari camel herder who sexually assaulted a woman at a heart clinic. And the attack was blamed on the fact, including the court, that he had very little interaction with women in his home country of Qatar, so he didn't really know how to behave with women. The only woman he really came into contact with was his mother. Well, I don't know, does he normally drag his mother into a toilet and sexually abuse her, sexually assault her for 5 minutes until she can be rescued? I think not. This man had denied 2 counts of attempted rape, but he has been convicted of various crimes, and he'll be sent to prison for the unnecessarily short amount of time. But what I love is, when we talk about cultural differences, I'll get, Ofcom complaints or, other complaints. Like, when you talk about key cultural differences between people from different parts of the world and the cultures that they come from, particularly in the Middle East, countries like Pakistan, many parts of Africa, where women are not even second-class citizens. They dream of being second-class citizens. Second-class citizens are their sons. They're third- or fourth-class citizens. And the attitudes to women and how they dress and how they should behave and what they are for. When we talk about that, we're racist and bigoted. When my wonderful colleague Alex Phillips talks about the reality she and many other women younger than me have to put up with on the streets of this country from men from abroad who have no respect, who follow and harass women in the street and will not take no for an answer. When these things happen, we're accused of being bigoted and xenophobic and Islamophobic and everything else. But when it's convenient in a court for this man to say, but and his lawyers, and we've seen cases of this in the last week and other cases as well, he didn't know any better because he hadn't really come across women before. So then the cultural difference is allowed to be used as a defence.
No, it's complete.
And that's always the case. And people are allowed to... So today it's a defence, tomorrow it's bigotry, whichever it is.
No, at the very least you could pick one, I suppose. I don't know how anyone can continue to maintain the position that our system is just fundamentally broken. And you were talking there earlier about the people who, you know, shall we say, the kind of do-gooders on this issue.
Yeah.
What I think has become abundantly clear is if you want an immigration policy or an asylum policy which is humane, works for everyone involved, it has to be sane. It can't be out of control.
Sane would be a bare minimum.
Asylum cannot become a route for illegal migration. If you, as many people, you know, in the kind of North London dinner party set, to use that old cliche, say, well, they should be allowed to work. Well, that's a much easier proposition when it's not just become a funnel for illegal migration, when it's much more selective, when it's much more able to root out people who are here for the wrong reasons, who have previous convictions, and so on and so forth. So I just think it serves absolutely no one, the status quo, certainly not the people who are finding themselves victimised by someone who probably had a string of convictions in the other countries.
Well, exactly. Can I just say, what I can't work out is why on earth a 27-year-old Qatari camel herder was in the UK for heart treatment. What's going on? What on earth is going on? It's utterly bizarre. But there we are. I do want to hear from you. But that story, the Channel migrants working as Deliveroo and Uber Eats delivery drivers within hours of arriving. Give us a call on that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Lots of texts and tweets coming. We'll get to those up next. First up, though, the reunion of the century is just around the corner, and we're giving you a chance to win a pair of, yes, Oasis tickets in Manchester on July the 19th. You heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is sold out, but talk can get you in. That's not all, though. Alongside the tickets, we'll put you up for a night in a hotel and put £5,000 in your back pocket, completely tax-free. Listen up right now for everything you need to know and how to enter. Genuinely, this happened yesterday as well. For some reason, we can't play this competition. I think it's in the adverts on the radio, if not on the TV side of things, the visual side of things. But there is a competition, and we'd love you to enter it and hopefully win. And by the way, can you take me along as the second person? You can keep the 5k there. 11:20 is the time right now. This is Talk. Kind of symbolic attempted strike with strikes on other air bases or US bases in the region. I mean, the biggest one is in Bahrain. A lot of nervousness there, but Iran signalled that it was going to do this to the base in Qatar, and that does suggest that this is sort of a bit of a face-saving exercise. That's very much the hope, that this is a symbolic thing they can show to their domestic audience.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to show. 11:22 is the time. I said there is a competition. I think we could get details of it in around 11:30. Promise you will get those details. Right now, let's get to your messages and your calls coming in on, two of the biggest topics we're talking about today, Donald Trump and that complete and total ceasefire between Israel and Iran. That doesn't seem to be certainly a complete and total ceasefire right now, but also about those Channel migrants working as delivery drivers. Let's get to your messages first up on Donald Trump and that ceasefire. Richard says, good old Trump always gets it wrong. Peter says Israel breaks the ceasefire all the time. Do they? Neil says Trump is a proven liar. Barnaby says perhaps Trump knows Iran will break the ceasefire, which will give Israel or the US a reason to finish the job off in Iran. I mean, they can go in any time they want anyway. I don't really think that they need to do that, do they? Evan says Trump sometimes is crazy. You started a job that's going well. Why would you stop halfway? Iran is already battered. This should be the best time, to finish the job and eliminate the Ayatollah threat to global peace and security. And Ruth says if they're still shooting missiles, it's not a ceasefire. Let's go to the phone lines. Phil is in Hertfordshire and you want to talk about Iran. Phil, what do you want to say?
Good afternoon. Good morning, Julia. I do apologise.
I get it wrong both ways, don't worry.
I know. There's just so much going on in the world. Julia, it was just about when after the strike, Iran come out and said sort of basically, ha, 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 we've moved everything. You know, you haven't achieved anything. Well, OK, well, before that you were saying we haven't got anything. And we are complying. So what have you moved?
And the useful idiots in the West go, all fine. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. So, you can't have it both ways, can you? Either you have got something and you've been bombed, or you're just trying to save face and say, oh, well, yeah, but we've moved it. Well, OK, well, so you're admitting then that you had something.
So you believe totally justified those attacks?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, there's been so many warning signals, isn't there, over the years? Yeah. And the funding from Iran of all these sort of groups around the world causing chaos. And I agree. I think if those people have developed a nuclear bomb, they would have used it, whether it was a small tactical one or on whatever scale. Yeah. But then, our lefty friends, what would they have said about that? Oh, well, they're justified in using it.
Well, it was always they were provoked. They were provoked. That's the thing. What do you make of, say, Donald Trump's actions on this? And again, my view is, if only he had the same view on Russia and Zelensky and saw it and Ukraine and saw it so clear cut. But in terms of, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz being very clear, this is to be welcomed. What in terms of the actual attack and now the ceasefire, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte basically saying, this was a legal attack by US, and then the British Prime Minister and Foreign Secretary all a bit, can we de-escalate please, and a bit mealy-mouthed. What did you make of that?
Well, my opinion of that was this. America will be looking at Starmer, Lammy, and saying, well, who are you going to de-escalate? What are you going to de-escalate? You haven't been involved in any of this.
We're irrelevant.
Exactly.
But is that a problem for us? And then one of the things, people thought of Tony Blair as being George Bush's lapdog after 2001 and the 9/11 attacks, but, we were very close to America. America is the world's policeman, whether people like it or not.
Absolutely, and that people don't like it. And I think, Julia, yes, it is very relevant. We've lost, as a country, a lot of respect, I believe, not just from America, but I believe from other countries around the world. I think that even our so-called Starmer's buddies in Europe, they're looking at him and probably thinking, you haven't quite got it, have you? Yeah. They're not putting on a very good presentation on the front by sending the people that they're sending to represent us, like Lammy. Yeah. What on earth?
Apparently, David Lammy last night, was just sitting there in the House of Commons and just having a nice dinner with a beer in the House of Commons. While all this stuff was going on.
Well, that speaks volumes, doesn't it? They're not exactly the people that make you stop and pay attention. No. Hang about.
Absolutely.
Lammy's on the TV. Starmer's on. Let's see what we've got to say. Unfortunately, they've created a rod for their own back, I believe, because of the way they're portraying themselves.
Very interesting, Phil. Thank you so much. Always appreciate you calling. Paul is on the line in Portsmouth. Now, Paul, you want to talk about where we are with these Channel migrants who are, openly working for Deliveroo and Just Eat and all these other apps by basically subletting, these effectively these licenses to work. What do you make of that?
Oh, Julia. What I don't understand is I was an employer and you had to
jumped through all sorts of hoops to make sure that people were allowed to work in Britain.
Yeah, but you do that with the person who's licensed. They're allowed to work. They got a permit to work. They're British passport, but then they allow them to basically share that license out.
But what I'm saying is, why aren't Deliveroo, Uber Eats and whatever? They are obviously not going to the lengths that they should do.
Yeah.
So why, if you just use ChatGPT or Google, you'll see that the fines that they dish out to an employer for using illegal people who are in the UK illegally, around £45,000 per person.
Yep.
So why aren't Deliveroo and Uber Eats being hammered for allowing this to go on?
But also, here's the thing. Why is it not being cracked down, even if they're not being fined? I mean, again, the government not paying any attention, the local police not paying any attention. I mean, surely somebody keeps an eye on. They've got an asylum hotel, with 40 Uber Eats, Deliveroo and Just Eats, bikes parked outside. Do you think they might go, oh, I wonder if people are working here?
Well, yeah, but just use ChatGPT or use Google and see the fines that they dish out. But Uber Eats, I've never heard of Uber Eats or Deliveroo being fined for using these people. So someone is deliberately turning a blind eye, aren't they?
Yes. It
must be.
And why do you think they're doing that? Because it's in no one's interest that we allow this black market to go. And again, yet another pull factor of the UK that you can get away with working illegally. Because we're always told, but if we have a digital ID card, then this won't happen. Well, they've got them in lots of other countries in Europe, and it doesn't stop anything happening. And if no one bothers checking anything, then it doesn't matter whether you've got it or not, does it?
No, but what? I mean, it's not hard. You don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to catch them, do you? All you have to do is order a pizza and ask the guy who turns up to show his proof that he's allowed to work in Britain.
Yeah, I know. It's really not complicated.
It's in plain sight.
Yeah, but also, if you get a license to do these deliveries, you're not allowed to hand it on to someone else. And the same with that. Same if you get an Uber or any other app, car. I want that to be the guy who it says it is, with the photo and the actual car when he turns up. I've had a few where the car's turned up and it's like, well, wait a second, yeah, you for Julia, and I'm like, yeah, that your car doesn't match. It's the wrong colour. It's the wrong make. It's not. Oh no, yeah, I changed my car. I went, yeah, not getting in, mate. Sorry, just don't know who the hell you are. There's nothing registered here. Not a chance. And again, if it's a teenage girl, I'd very much feel even more strongly about it. Paul, thank you for that. 11:29 is the time. Quick word from Tom Slater on that. This is the thing. It's the hiding in plain sight on the migrant workers. All of this stuff is hiding in plain sight, and no one cares. But again, I suppose if you've got police forces and who don't do anything about burglaries and I mean, I've literally been with community police officers. So someone's riding the bike up the street next to them and gone, hello, this is not allowed. I mean, this is a minor crime, but it's still the general annoyance. I know it's not rape or murder, but I'd still like them to tackle it when it happens in front of them. And if they don't tackle anything that blatant, they're not going to tackle anything. No, not at all. And I think everyone's sick of the kind of build-up of things that are small, but you put them all together and it turns into a very big problem, doesn't it? And when they start thinking that shoplifting is small, not a small crime. No, especially if you run or own a shop. Exactly. Full point worth making. 11:30 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Andrew Foxer, who's a defence expert, about where we are with Donald Trump and also that 5% defence spending. Also going to talk to your favourite and mine, Labour Party former spokesman James Mathewson, about Labour MPs rebelling over welfare reform. 108 Labour backbench MPs have signed a motion which would have basically collapsed any attempt by the Labour Party to reform welfare. Not that they were going to reform it very well, only going to save £5 billion, which brackets they probably weren't going to end up saving anyway, but has Keir Starmer just simply lost all ability to do anything? That's all coming up in the next half hour. You want to stay tuned? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 11:33 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk more about, well, you know, defence, security, Middle East, everywhere, Ukraine, you name it. Back home, small point, defending our own realm with Andrew Fawkes. He's a defence expert. He's also a research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and is a former major in the Parachute Regiment. Very good morning to you, Andrew.
Hi, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. Well, look, let's talk about Israel, Iran. Announcement last night from Donald Trump of this total and complete ceasefire that doesn't appear to be, complete and total ceasefire. I don't know if that's different. Doesn't appear to be completely holding. We know there were missile attacks up to the last moment, but certainly Israel has claimed that Iran has attacked since, although Iran has denied that. Is there a ceasefire or isn't there?
Well, I think it's a ceasefire in the kind of literal sense where they're potentially ceasing fire. It doesn't actually solve the longer-term problems. It's not a strategic resolution to the situation, but it certainly enables Mr. Trump to try and position himself as a deal maker who brought peace through strength, which was kind of his entire aim of the whole thing, I think.
And that's been his whole shtick. I'm a president who wants to end wars. So he goes in, he strikes. Israel have done their airstrikes, taken out. There's so much of Iran's military and possibly potential nuclear capability. Job done, willing to walk away now. And it's certainly clear Iran is really willing to walk away because their response to the US strikes on the nuclear sites was this rather sort of pathetic little sort of poke at an attempt at sites in Qatar where everyone got a warning, no one died, they didn't even hit the targets. That was quite a pathetic response from a regime that said they were going to retaliate and everyone would regret it.
It was, but look at what victory at this point looks like for Iran. They've had an absolute battering on the battlefield, and yes, their nuclear program has certainly, if not been destroyed, it's certainly been set back. But it's all about creating the narrative for Iran. They have an army of online bots to try and influence world opinion. And what they will claim off the back of this is that they held firm against the might of the USA and Israel. And they were able to land punches, which of course they were in Tel Aviv and Haifa and other Israeli cities. They certainly managed to, have minimal effect, but it certainly was there. Minimal in the sense that it compared to the hundreds of airstrikes that Israel successfully carried out. This was, in pure numbers terms, a pretty clear Israeli tactical victory. But Iran will say they won because they survived, and it's as simple as that. And yesterday was just a bit more theatre and performance to contribute to that narrative.
Yeah, and there is, I think, a lot of people watching and commenting on this don't realise how much theatre is actually involved in this, from Donald Trump to mullahs to Israel as well. But I mean, the reality is, I would say that Israel, the people of Iran probably, the Middle East and the world is safer today than it was before the weekend and certainly than before the 12-day war began between Israel and Iran, hot war proper, as Donald Trump has called the 12-day war. Do you think the world is a safer place now?
Only marginally. The regime still have the ability to reconstitute that nuclear capability. I don't think it'll be especially speedy, but it's there and the intent is there. And ultimately, nothing has changed about the malign intent of the regime in Tehran. They will still leverage their proxies overseas to, sell drugs, be narco traffickers, make money, smuggle arms and people. They will still look to carry out nefarious activities in Western countries. So they may be slightly beaten, but they're certainly not completely defeated. And until that regime meets its end, I don't think the world could ever be really considered safe from Iran's meddle.
And the mooted response from other fellow Middle East leaders of Arabic, Muslim countries was noticeable. I mean, deafening silence in terms of condemnation of the US or Israel, I thought. What did you make of the reaction of leaders in the West outside of America? I mean, you look at, Keir Starmer and David Lammy, our foreign secretary's response, and obviously complete lack of, input and role in this. And then you compare it with, say, the NATO Secretary General, so I'm trying not to sneeze, and Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, who were much more clear this was legal, this was a good thing to have done, but a very sort of sitting on the fence response from the British leadership.
I think it's a good example of how, when he came into his second presidency, Mr. Trump made it very clear that he was neither saw a need nor wanted to be an ally to Europe, and I think European leaders' responses reflect that in many ways, because frankly at this point it's not really our business. Of course it is, but they will see this as an opportunity to keep out of the conflict, not to escalate with Iran on domestic issues, and keep everything at arm's length and let it be an American and an Israeli problem. Frankly, if we were looking at the Conservative government before Mr. Trump, when we were still very tight allies with America, and I don't think we are allies at all anymore.
Well, we were dupes. I mean, Donald Trump used us as a decoy to get Keir Starmer to leave Canada and say, oh yeah, he's not gonna attack.
Yeah, exactly, and he's done that a couple of times. He did it with Macron as well a few months ago. So Mr. Trump has burned that bridge, and this is a reflection of that. I think, like I said, a year ago we'd have been full-throated in support of Israel, but such is the changing nature of the strategic alliance.
I mean, we don't. I mean, neither Israel nor America really needs us to get involved, but there's a sort of as Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, says, a lack of moral clarity in Keir Starmer, trying to sort of go, well, on the one hand and on the other hand, and whereas this seems to me to be, again, some of these conflicts that we've got going on in the world right now seem to me to be basic IQ tests. I really do think that, in terms of black and white, moral good and evil. And it doesn't mean that everything that you don't have to support a particular government, you don't have to think that everything they do is right or wrong, but in terms of the fundamental principles behind various these conflicts, it seems to me to be blatant easy. Are we on the side of Israel or are we on the side of Iran? I don't think that should be something you should have to pause to answer.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be a no-brainer. It's a brutal dictatorship versus a democracy, a flawed democracy, of course. But
like ours.
Show me one that isn't. Exactly. So this should be an easy question to answer, and yet so many people have failed that test based on their hatred of Israel for whatever reason. And it's astonishing that no matter how bad you think Israel might be, they don't come close to how terrible Iran is. And yet people seem utterly blinded and unable to make that distinction.
Indeed. With this war, obviously, the last 12 days, focus has moved away from Gaza, which was very much an obsession in the media, particularly the BBC. And I know that you've also been noted some of the reports and that have been coming out in the last few weeks, ever since the Gaza humanitarian aid was sort of handed out by a sort of Israel-backed body rather than the UN and UNRWA, and basically so that Hamas can't get hold of the aid and use it as a way of funding themselves and controlling the Palestinian people in Gaza. We've had report after report that there have been IDF attacks. I mean, clear massacres from the reports we're hearing. Reports from supposed eyewitnesses, Hamas-run health ministries saying, 20, 30, 40, sometimes people have been killed, including women and children. IDF soldiers, unilaterally opening fire. We've had reports from medics, some British-born medics, Western medics in hospitals saying we've had children brought in. They said they were attacked by, Israeli forces, etc., etc. Bizarrely, there never seems to ever be any mobile phone footage of these attacks, despite the fact that pretty much everyone in Gaza appears to have a mobile phone. And yet these massacres are being reported, every couple of days. Do you believe that is what is taking place?
No, I don't. I've spoken to people in the GHF and they adamantly deny that is happening.
They would, though, wouldn't they?
Well, the GHF, I think, the sources I've got are they're not neutral, but they're certainly not Israeli. And they're adamant that this is Hamas pushing a narrative. And actually, if you look at some of these reports, they all seem to originate from one journalist who works for Reuters, and he's been beating this drums for months, even before the GHF came in. So
he's one of the journalists who reported about the destruction by Israeli missiles of the hospital early in the war, which never happened.
Yeah, exactly that. So this has been a theme actually throughout the entire 20 months of conflict, that a single source report gets picked up by usually Al Jazeera, but sometimes another mainstream media station, and then that's it. Other journos pick it up and it just gets copied and pasted, and next thing you know, that's the dominant story. If I'm Hamas, I'm absolutely 100% trying to get the Israelis to open fire at me in those crowds. There's no question that is what they're trying to do. Yeah. The separation of Hamas from the aid supply is the single biggest body blow they've had all war. You could even make a case that it's a bigger blow than when they lost Sinwar or Deif, their leaders, because it has fundamentally affecting their ability to control the population of Gaza for the first time.
Yeah.
So they will be doing everything they can. And as always, when Israel gets the upper hand in Gaza, the disinformation space explodes to new and untold levels. And I think we're seeing that again. Have the Israelis opened fire in the vicinity? Yes, at times they have, in response to Hamas being there. Have we also seen videos of Hamas in the crowd shooting people? Yes, we have. So, as always, the truth is far harder to uncover.
Yeah. And the thing I've always thought was like, what on earth would be the point? Why would the Israeli soldiers be doing that? That would be an insane thing for them to do. It'd be immoral and wrong if it was on civilians, but also it would be an insane thing for them to do for Israeli PR alone. If you just think on that basis, it would be crazy. Why are you taking an aid and then shooting the people coming for the aid? It just doesn't make sense.
Even if it happened once, how on earth would their commanders allow that to happen again? It would just, it's the single most strategic.
But doesn't it make it strange then that the BBC website, the Sky website and others, are full of these reports?
Yeah, but they take their news from sources on the ground in Gaza, which means they're taking their news from Hamas, because they would not be allowed to speak to Western press if they weren't Hamas affiliated. And that's the point everyone seems to miss. Hamas have had a rigidly tight control on the information that's been coming out of Gaza, and all the journalists that are feeding this stuff to Western journalists have time and time again been proved to be less connected.
Yeah, exactly. Again and again, and then another documentary is pulled, and everyone says, "Oh, we're looking into it." But then, exactly. Just finally, small matter of a NATO summit. Keir Starmer is attending along with other NATO members. They're going to agree to 5% of GDP by 2035 to be spent on defence. Although there's an accusation that this is basically, smoke and mirrors, because it's only 3.5% on core spending, and we're going to include, giving money to Mauritius to rent back the Diego Garcia Air Base, which we already have and own, and even building a third runway at Heathrow. Is this enough money? Where's it going to come from? And is it soon enough?
Well, there's no point setting a sum total that you're going to throw at defence unless you have a very clear idea what you want to spend it on. Now, Labour have done, I think, a relatively good job in the last defence review of articulating that, but we haven't had yet the detail from the armed forces themselves on what they think their role within that strategic defence review is. So we're waiting to kind of see what the armed forces say they need. This kind of sleight of hand has been a focus of defence spending in the UK since George Osborne, when he imposed huge cuts on the armed forces and then folded in the nuclear budget and military pensions, which had never counted as defence spending before. So he made up to 2% of GDP. And I suspect if someone's put a metaphorical gun to NATO leaders' heads to insist on 5%, we are going to see an awful lot more kind of fudging the books in order to make that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. Always good to get you on. Andrew Fox there, defence expert and research fellow at Henry Jackson Society, former military man himself. Tom Slater, your response to what he had to say?
No, I think particularly on that question of defence spending, because that's become such a perennial issue. The world is becoming a more dangerous place. Politicians, particularly Keir Starmer, likes to posture at these summits because he's so loathed at home. Getting on a plane and looking the statesman abroad becomes much more attractive. But aside from the more principled discussions we do have, the more substantive discussions about what do we need to do, where do we need to put this money, etc., there's just always so much smoke and mirrors to it. I mean, the fact that it's 5%, but 1.5% is just infrastructure broadly defined.
That's not going to defend us.
No, absolutely.
We're not going to be able to send that to help. And again, Zelensky, this prediction that, look, realistically, Russia is going to try and test NATO's resolve to actually protect its fellow members within the next 5 years. Every military person I speak to seems to think that is the case, very likely. You can't send a third runway at Heathrow or rent you pay to Mauritius for Diego Garcia base to go and protect our allies. You can't do that.
And there's been a lot of people who've been pointing out as well, where is the money going? Is the procurement
Where's the money coming
right?
from?
Absolutely. And these are things that the politicians clearly don't have any answers for. Partly because they haven't been thinking about it for a very long time. But we
exactly.
Shall see.
Yeah. Cold War's over, hot war's beginning. Get with the programme. Thank you very much indeed for that. Just some breaking news. Donald Trump has said that both Israel and Iran have violated the ceasefire in the Middle East. He did say also, as he boarded his Air Force One plane, that Iran's nuclear capacities are gone, and says Tehran will never rebuild its nuclear programme. I think he may be on the optimistic side on that front. 11:47 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking to former Labour Party spokesman James Mathewson. This always gets lively, about welfare reform, as more than 108 Labour MPs mount a major bid to stop any welfare reform at all. This is Talk.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely awful, and it really does signal some of the significant tensions globally that we're seeing over the last few years. And now this has really broken out. I mean, this is significant. This is the first time we're seeing active warfare with the Iranian state. I mean, we're even seeing reports literally in the last 10 minutes of Iran and Israel announcing different government and military strikes to one another. Tehran has been in receipt of some of that as well.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk right now about, well, not a lot happening at home. Let's talk about what's abroad, what's happening at home, with more than 100 Labour MPs, I think 108 at the last count, maybe more though, supporting a fresh effort to block the Labour government's plans changes to the benefit system. It's welfare reform that, well, doesn't really go far enough, but probably is the wrong kind of reform, cutting some of those PIP payments, personal independence payments for those who are disabled, but not actually cutting more than £5 billion off the benefits bill, which is set to rise by some £18 billion by about 2030, a year, by the way, a year, if they don't go ahead with those plans. But 108 Labour backbench MPs are basically saying we're not happy with this, and they've agreed to sign an amendment that would basically give them an opportunity to vote on a proposal to reject the whole welfare reform bill in its entirety. So what is going to happen there? Let's talk to James Mathewson. He's a former Labour Party spokesman and joins us once again. Good morning and welcome back to the show, James.
Good morning, Julia.
Our conversations do seem to often get lively, do they not? People seem to enjoy them. Always good to speak to you. Do you back these Labour MPs who are basically, well, I mean, they're tearing up Labour's 165 working majority by signing this amendment to basically throw the whole welfare bill out?
Yes, it's not a decision that they've come to lightly either. I haven't spoken to some of them of the past couple of days. Lots of them don't want to be doing this. They don't want to have to oppose the Labour government. Of course they don't. But unfortunately, what we're seeing from these Labour MPs is the heart of the Labour Party, the conscience of the Labour Party. And it's the leadership that has drifted in the opposite direction from that. So if the leadership had wanted the support of those, of course they want blind loyalty. They want, every government does that as a majority.
Vote how we tell you to vote, yes.
Exactly. That's, and the whips hope they can keep them in line and all the rest of it. But some things, I'm afraid, you just can't do. And if these people got into politics to try and reform welfare in the way that they want to see it done and have a strong welfare state, then you're not going to convince them to vote for this.
The trouble with this is, and yes, everyone can be concerned about some individual examples, and I have to say, I think this is a very flawed bill. I don't think we should be cutting the amount of benefits in real terms, which is what it would also do for people who are disabled. I think we should be making sure people can live a good quality life if they do need to rely on these sort of benefit payments. But it's called the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Bill, and one of the key proposals, that their idea is about cutting the costs of this exploding welfare bill, is to make it harder for this BBC copy says harder for disabled people with less severe conditions to claim PIP, the independence payment. I would say to make it harder for people who don't need it to get it. Now, given that we've had an explosion, I think another 1,000 people a day on the current rules are able to claim these benefits. There's been loads of evidence that these are being claimed by people, particularly when we're talking about mental health issues rather than physical issues, who in any other country, in any other time pre-COVID, would not be eligible for these benefits, getting a huge amount of money from the public purse. Not working because they don't have to, not contributing, it enables them to gain a huge number of other benefits, the housing benefit and all of that. We can't afford to basically put, a third of the people of working age on disability benefits when the third of the people on working age aren't disabled. It's exploding. It's got to be stopped, hasn't it, James?
No.
No, we should all be on disability benefits. Oh, no, I've hurt my thumb. Disability benefits, please.
No, of course not, Julia. But the situation here is, firstly, I would say we shouldn't be looking to the past as an example of how we want to build our country going forward. We should be moving forward. We should be improving things ever going forward as a country.
No, but the fact that we've had a massive increase in the number of people, the percentage of people of working age who are claiming this benefit, you think that we do actually have more people who are disabled now?
Yes, absolutely. And let me explain to you why. No, let me explain to you why. Because this disability is not about being out of work, okay? This is not a work replacement disability. PIP is about covering the cost that comes with having a disability, because there are extra costs to your life by having a disability. Now, of course, the issue that we disagree on time and time again on here is where you draw that line on what classes as a disability and what causes an impact to your life. Now, for example, I have autism, right? I was diagnosed when I was 20. My diagnosis at the time was Asperger's. I would be able to put in a PIP claim if I wanted, and it would be assessed. I would likely be turned down because all of the things I would choose in the options on the tick boxes would be things that don't impact my day-to-day life or my ability to work.
You'd be turned down because you don't need it.
Exactly, but there's no problem with turning people down. People who
someone who made a different, someone with the same diagnosis who gave different answers would get it. But what if they also don't need it?
They wouldn't automatically get it.
I'm not saying they'd automatically get it.
They'd have to prove themselves through this very harrowing process that goes on.
A very harrowing Zoom interview. Zoom interview.
Which is still carried out by private contractors.
A Zoom interview is harrowing.
I'm sorry, if you have to go and try and prove yourself while you live with a chronic condition, whether it be mental health related or physical health related, then it is often harrowing.
Sorry, but you shouldn't have to. So, hello, I would like thousands and thousands of pounds from the state. Oh, the state doesn't have any money, from other hard-working people. Of course you should have to prove it.
Of course you should have to prove it. There is a process for that. But this process is built, we know this. The private companies who get the contracts to manage these things, they are built on this whole idea of trying to cut down the amount of people.
Okay, they are, and they were, except for the fact that they're not cutting down on it, they're allowing an explosion of it. So something else is going wrong. And your argument is that all these people are sicker and unable to work.
But what does that tell you? If they're still cutting down it, if they're still coming at it with that hardcore safe approach, and it's still going up...
They clearly have different incentives. No, it is not possible that we are a miraculously sicker country now than we were 5 years ago. Or that we should have so many more disabled and sick people than any other Western nation. What, I mean, is there something in the water? What is it?
It's not, a disability isn't sickness, it's not weakness. We're not looking at people and thinking that, no, I'm not saying that you did, I'm just saying it's not a failure or something to look at negatively. It's just a reality of what is.
No, you say it's a reality of what is. How on earth have we got from a situation where we have so many more people who are now registered, needing to have disability benefits of these kind? And by the way, I know that you can work when you're on these benefits. The vast majority of people don't work who claim these benefits.
Well, that's because of another element, a separate element entirely, which is handled differently. Because you can, if you can work and receive PIP, that your PIP is about your cost that comes with your disability, because there are costs to your life, whether it be costs of prescriptions, medications, all things like that. And then obviously on top of that, the adaptations that you have to make to life. And lots of people, by the way, people trade this for the Motability scheme a lot of the time, which is a fantastic scheme, which allows people to get access to vehicles, to have their freedom and their independence when otherwise they wouldn't. Because we look at, and you talk about this regularly, Julia. It's something I
massive explosion in that as well.
When we talk about cars, because London-centric people and all the rest of it don't understand the power that a car. If my mum as a single parent didn't have a car when we were growing up, then we would have been stuffed.
I understand that. The question is whether the other taxpayers should be paying for people's brand new cars. That's a different matter entirely.
You exchange your PIP payment for it. Your PIP payment isn't any more than it should be because you're getting a car. The Motability scheme brings down that cost to be able to meet them where they are. That's how it works.
Yeah, it's just costing us absolutely billions of pounds. I just find it extraordinary that you and Labour MPs, 108 of them, apparently don't accept that we've seen a massive explosion in this. We can't afford it. We cannot have, I think it's one in eight people of working age not working and claiming some of these benefits. The numbers don't add up.
We can't afford to not afford it, Julia. If we're going to do a welfare state, we've got to do a welfare state.
A welfare state should be people who need it, not people who feel anxious on a Monday morning about going to work because it might be raining.
It's the same with the NHS, I'm afraid. We talk about it being this bottomless pit of money. That's universal free healthcare at the point of delivery.
Well,
that's what it is.
Well, I think most people just like to get it delivered, wouldn't they? And we'll have to leave it there. James Matthews, you can hear the music. Times Against us, James Mathieson, former Labour Party spokesman. I'll get Tom Slater's thoughts on that. And indeed, your thoughts very, very welcome as well. Keep your calls coming in on what's going on in the Middle East. And indeed, those Channel migrants working for Deliveroo. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show, or welcome to the show if you just joined us. This is Talk, the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. By the way, if you've just joined us, you missed a rip-roaring show. Lots and lots of top guests, as per usual. And if you do ever miss any of the show, don't forget you can go to our YouTube page. Not just Talk YouTube page, but my own page. I know, so exciting. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. You've got no excuse for not finding it. It's really that easy. Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe so you never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking more about that ceasefire that isn't quite a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. Donald Trump has just said, he's on Air Force One at Maryland in the States, that both Iran and Israel have breached the ceasefire terms, even though he said it was a complete and total ceasefire last night. We're also going to be talking about those Brits rescued from Riswell landing at London Heathrow. More than 4,000 Brits had registered an interest in leaving the country. Whether they'll want to continue to leave now, we'll find out. Also, Home Office officials claiming that Iran could be funding Palestine action. This comes after the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, announced a Commons vote next week on whether to prescribe the group as a terrorist organisation. And we're going to talk more about that Sun investigation, their front page today, revealing that small boat migrants are working at Deliveroo as delivery takeaway drivers and riders, along, Uber Eats and all the others, within hours of arriving in the UK. Extraordinary. Also, small point, by the way, we're also paying for their accommodation. So they're working on the black market, earning up to £1,000 a week by all accounts, not paying tax, and I'd say putting an awful lot of people at risk. Do you want to open the door to an illegal migrant, or do you want your teenage daughter to open the door to an illegal migrant making a delivery? I'm wondering. We're going to talk about all of that. Love to hear your thoughts on all the big topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text on 87222. You can also send a message to us on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. I promise we're going to get some more of your calls in this next hour. In particular, on the ceasefire or not a ceasefire in the Middle East, and of course those channel migrants as well. Lots of top guests coming up, including Natasha Housdorf for the next few moments, and of course Lord Craig McKinley talking about that channel migrant worker story. First up, let me introduce you once again to Tom Slater, editor at Spiked Online, joining me for the whole show today. We lock the doors, he can't escape till 1. Tom, welcome back to the show. I do want to talk to you about, just before we go to Natasha Housdorf, the conversation we were just having with the former Labour Party spokesman James Matthews. He says he's no longer left Labour Party, thinks the Labour Party is far too right-wing now. And this is about these Labour MPs. We understand 108 of them. 12 committee chairs, interestingly. Yeah. These are senior MPs mounting a bid to block any welfare reform. They basically signed an amendment, which is a parliamentary device, basically would just block the entire welfare bill that's going through. I would argue the welfare bill that aims to save £5 billion a year is A, won't save £5 billion a year, and B, it's not enough, and C, it does a lot of the wrong things. But this wipes out Labour's majority. We're less than a year into Keir Starmer's premiership. He can't push through a basic bit of legislation, which is mild at best, I would say inadequate at best, to tackle this issue. What do you make of this?
I think it says two things loud and clear, one of which is the fundamental weakness of Keir Starmer. We know that he's very unpopular in the country, but the fact that he can't even hold his own parliamentary party together is striking. It's not usually this quickly that someone who has become Prime Minister through winning an election, not just kind of scuttling into office when their predecessors have to fall on their sword or what have you, that their authority crumbles this quickly. I think the other thing that it shows is that the Labour Party often doesn't really know what it's for. Oftentimes it just looks like a kind of system for human rights lawyers and people who worked in the charity sector to get a nice house, a nice seat in Parliament, shall we say. But welfareism seems to be the kind of replacement for an ideology. Like there's this idea now on the centre left and the left more broadly, which is that the whole end point of politics is to just keep as many people in receipt of welfare as possible. Yeah. Even though
that's somehow a moral thing to do, as opposed to really, really bad for people.
And that kind of shift from, say, full employment as the ultimate aim to essentially just maintaining the benefit system, even to the point where you have whole towns and cities across the country where you can have a quarter of the population who aren't in work. This is something which is clearly should be an outrage to a party whose name is Labour. The whole point, the dignity in work, that people should be in work, better working conditions and so on and so forth, more control over their lives. But that's the problem, is this kind of do-gooding welfareism has become a substitute for actual,
but also treating
more
everyone as
traditional left-wing
victims,
politics.
as everyone, you know, and people can't help themselves, opposed to a hand up rather than a hand out. And again, I don't think there's anyone, I'd be appalled by anybody who didn't think that we should absolutely make sure that people who are disabled should be given, who cannot work, give them all the help and the lifestyle, a reasonable lifestyle. I don't want anyone ever worrying about putting their heating on if they're severely disabled, or looking after a child that's mentally ill, or I mean, all of it. That's what a civilised nation should do. We have the money to do that. But also enabling people, you know, if some, you know, I can walk to work, I can get the tube or whatever. But someone who desperately needs a car but couldn't possibly afford a car but wants to work and they need it as a tool to get around. Again, I don't have a concern about this, but we can see that there are so many people milking the system, and this message that is going out, particularly to young people, basically saying, yeah, you can just feel a little bit lower for a few days, and therefore you don't have to work for the rest of your life. That is not only terrible for the taxpayers forced to pay for those people for the rest of their lives, but it's also condemning them to a life of hopelessness and misery. Because I agree with you, I think work is good for you. I think self-respect and also the moral duty, which the left used to agree with, which the moral duty of able-bodied people to contribute and work.
No, absolutely, and to be properly compensated for that. And I think you're absolutely right. There is no indignity in someone who cannot work because of disability, because of accidents, because of all sorts of different things, in having to, you know, be in receipt of state benefits in order to live a dignified life. That's why you have a welfare state and a safety net. At the same time, why are we treating this as something which should be cast around for large parts of the population? If nothing else, it's like crumbs from the table. This is not a life in which you can get on and prosper and so forth. So the way in which it's being kind of fetishised by a left who think of the Labour Party and the state primarily as just like a giant charity rather than something which allows for people to take control of their own lives, that's a really big shift which has taken place in our politics without anyone really realising.
Absolutely. Really interesting. I'd love to get your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000 if you want to have yours say, so we get your calls in the next hour. Right now, delighted to say that Natasha Hausdorff joins us. She's a barrister and legal director at UK Lawyers for Israel. A very good afternoon to you, Natasha.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. Look, we've got a ceasefire in the Middle East that isn't a ceasefire. It's already been broken by both Iran and Israel, according to President Trump. He said, I have to get Israel to calm down, he said, in response to what Israel claims were attacks by Iranian missiles. Iran has denied there were missiles, but there were missiles, so where have they come from? What do you make of, first of all, the claims of ceasefire, and also the claims that the strikes by Israel and indeed on Iran and the strikes by America on those nuclear sites were illegal, which has been claimed by, we understand, among others, the Attorney General of the UK?
Well, we're still waiting for some confirmation as to whether those leaks as to his advice were correct. But if they are, I would say that they are certainly not a reflection of the applicable international law. Israel has been in an ongoing armed conflict with Iran for decades. Of course, most of that was conducted by Iran through its terror proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and latterly the Houthis. But it's also struck Israel directly across last year with hundreds of ballistic missiles. And this is the reported violation of the ceasefire after it came into effect that Iran continued to fire at least one ballistic missile. That has been taken very seriously. We've had both the defense minister in Israel, Katz, and also the chief of staff indicating that this is a violation of the ceasefire and it will be met with a very strong response. So in light of those developments and perhaps the developments over the last week, perhaps we don't take every word that President Trump writes on social media as gospel. And we'll have to see what response that violation by Iran is met with.
Well, indeed. And a lot of people, including our own Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy as well, kind of tried to sit on the fence about this issue. But we haven't seen that from, say, Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General. It was very, very clear that this was a legal strike by America. And indeed, the Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, very happy to openly praise the move. Many here, not just our prime ministers, but the commentariats are talking about how this was an act of war that would make the world less safe. But there seems to be, I mean, I know we're all going out and being surprised by this, but there seem to be two different rules when it comes to anything that involves Israel or the defence of Israel that come into place whenever there's any international military action.
Well, this is why it's strong, perhaps irrefutable evidence that what is being discussed is not law, because it is being used to justify a political position. One, in terms of what members of the British government have been saying, is ultimately not just anti-Israel but anti-Western. I think there needs to be a realization, and one that is publicly reflected, that after the last 12 days, the Middle East and the world as a whole is in fact much safer, that the losses that the Islamic regime in Iran have suffered have improved the prospects of a peaceful future across the region, have certainly lessened the ability of the IRGC to target Western interests around the world. And we know that there have been multiple recent plots by this terrorist organisation in the UK that have been foiled. But it's also an increasingly positive prospect for the Iranian people and the ability of the people of Iran to throw off this grotesque, oppressive, dictatorial rule. So anyone that's suggesting that the world is less safe as a result of what has happened over the last 12 days, I'm afraid doesn't understand the first thing about how the Middle East works.
Well, I mean, this is it, isn't it? Well, what did you make of the protests? We saw actually on Saturday there were the usual protests, and there were, I mean, it was even before the airstrikes by America on Iran, where we actually had people holding up placards with Ayatollah Khomeini on. A man who, and these, by the way, people who think they're on the left, and Iranian flags, for placards of Ayatollah Khomeini, who imprisons and murders and tortures, women for not covering their heads, their hair properly. I mean, you and I wouldn't last 5 minutes there, would we? I mean, an evil, awful regime that homosexuality is so illegal and so badly punished that young men who are gay are forced to mutilate their bodies and pretend that they're trans and think they're women so they can stay alive and stay a part of society. I mean, we are talking about the most brutal regime. People marching for Iran on Saturday, and again we saw with Palestine Action, the demonstration we had not at Westminster but Trafalgar Square. They were banned by the police from being outside Westminster. We're told by Yvette Cooper, the Secretary, they're going to be a vote in Parliament next week to prescribe them as a terrorist group after the attack on RAF Brize Norton, where they caused millions of pounds worth of damage to some planes at the Air Force Base by throwing red paint on them. But we've got people standing up for Palestine Action, people standing up for Iran. What do you make of that at UK Lawyers for Israel?
Well, in terms of the left's support for the Ayatollah, let's not forget this was a key component of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, where Iran had its freedom taken away from it. There are many Iranian dissidents that have warned about this unholy alliance between the left and the Islamists that facilitated that takeover, that coup in 1979, and that threatens similar prospects on the basis of what we're witnessing on our streets. In relation to Palestine Action, I mean, this is an organisation that UK Lawyers for Israel has successfully addressed over many, many years in relation to its criminal activity, in particular dealing with its funding and recruitment mechanisms. But of course, its actions have made a mockery of the criminal justice system and the police's total reluctance over many years now to deal with blatant criminality across manufacturers of arms for the British Armed Forces and related companies to those entities. This suggestion by the Home Secretary that it will finally be prescribed comes many years after organisations like UK Lawyers for Israel were calling for this, given the definition in Section 1 of the Terrorism Act, which covers, frankly, all of the conduct of this organisation for a number of years now. Yeah. We Believe in Israel ran a very successful public letter writing campaign. But of course, that was only taken seriously after the attack that you described on an RAF base and the damage to a, I think, £25 million plane. So this is far too little, far too late. The suggestion by the Home Secretary that this will need to be put to a vote in Parliament, I'm afraid, isn't strictly accurate. The Houses of Parliament are able to voice opposition to it, but this is action that ought to have been taken long ago under secondary legislation.
Yeah, this is a Home Office, it was a government decision. What do you make of those who claim that these are people exercising their free speech? This is not personally, they're not attacking people. I've even heard, and blows my mind, but hey, Twitter/X is that mad? People saying, well, what about the suffragettes? They also used, this sort of, not violent protest, they say, but criminal damage as part of their protest. I feel that I'm embarrassed asking you about this, but what do you make of that particular claim, Natasha?
It's simply not true that Palestine Action have not attacked individuals. They have marked employees of the firms that they have gone after out. They have attacked their homes. They have attacked the individual personnel at many of these sites. They have conducted this campaign of terror in order to seek to influence government policy, and that falls squarely under the definition of terrorism. And furthermore, everything that we have seen latterly, and it was confirmed in the last protest in support of Palestine Action, is that this is an organisation that allies itself with terrorist organisations. It has endorsed Hamas. In many respects, it has also celebrated the 7th of October and subsequent terrorist atrocities against Israelis and Jews. So this is a deeply anti-Semitic, criminal, terrorist entity, and it's high time that the full force of the legal framework to recognise and limit their abilities to conduct, what the Met Police Commissioner himself lamented. Extraordinary that after so many years of inaction by the Metropolitan Police and other police forces to deal with this terrorist organisation.
Although I was excited to see that when people started chanting, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which of course means the destruction and annihilation of Israel. Most of the people shouting it don't know which sea and which river, as we often realise. But I'll finally realise that might be a problem statement. But I always think the fascinating comparison with the suffragettes. A, the suffragettes didn't have the vote. And B, Palestine Action members do. You have an ability to change policy in this country. You can do so with campaigns, with protests. You can letter write. You can try and influence politics. But what you don't get to do is break the law to do it.
Or indeed call for genocide with that very slogan.
Small point worth making. Small point worth making. But it barely seems to be an issue for this government, does it? Can I ask you just finally? I'm taking this tone because it just befuddles me that we've got ourselves into such a mess in this country. But the enemy within, I think, is as worrying as the enemy without. Jewish doctors, I think not unreasonably, say they now fear for their safety at the British Medical Association's annual conference, where 1 in 10 of the items on the agenda to debate relate to the Israel-Gaza conflict. That's 45 separate motions discussing Israel or Palestine being put forward at their annual meeting, which is taking place this week. It started yesterday, going to Wednesday. They include a claim that Israel is establishing a system of apartheid, a motion arguing that the BMA should support doctors to refuse to pay their taxes to the UK government because it's complicit in genocide, etc., etc. We've had, they say, an anti-Semitic demonstration held outside the conference centre. Here's the thing I don't get. The British Medical Association is the doctors' trade union. That's what they do. Their job is to represent doctors in their, pay and working conditions and contracts with the NHS. What the hell are they doing having an opinion on Israel, Gaza or anything else in the Middle East?
Well, opinions on political situations aside, Julia, we have had constant referrals by concerned medical professionals and members of the public about members of the British Medical Association that have voiced support for terror, that have glorified terrorism, that have clearly engaged in anti-Semitic rhetoric. A lot of this is on social media. And the fact of the matter is my organisation has been actively involved in taking those referrals, making complaints to the Medical Association, and those are being taken very seriously because of the legitimate grounds upon which they have been made. What we have seen in the context of the meeting that is currently taking place comes on the back of hundreds of similar resolutions that were put forward last year, many of which UKLFI were also involved in as a result of these referrals. But I'll just perhaps read you a part of what was passed yesterday, which is that there was a commitment to continue to regard any doctors erased from the register for non-violent protest as professional colleagues in good standing. I mean, this resolution, which was passed yesterday, is a blatant attempt to undermine the regulatory framework of the medical profession. And I think it's something we need to be taking very seriously.
Yeah, indeed. I just find it absolutely extraordinary. So many of our institutions have been taken over by... Again, they're obsessed with one particular conflict. I don't know. Did they have lots of motions about what's going on in Yemen, or did they have lots in Syria? No, funny that. I can't, again, never work out what it is about this one particular conflict they're so concerned about. But I'm sure there is an answer to that. Natasha Hausdorff, thank you for your great work, and great to have you on the show. Barrister and legal director at the UK Lawyers for Israel Group. Tom Slater, if you're just coming on the BMA, but I do think it's sort of thing that you guys write about Spiked Online is there are just so many organisations, whether it's the BMA, whether it's whether it's the BBC, whether it's loads of other organisations, human rights lawyers largely, but the great and the good, who have the Dawn Frenches of this world, the Stephen Fries, or whoever I don't know where he is on this one. I know he's mad on the trans stuff, but they seem to just. They literally have all the wrong opinions based on no facts at all. I mean, last time I looked, to become a doctor, you had to have 3 grade A levels. I thought these were the clever people.
This was the thing I found, one of the more alarming things I found about the domestic response to this conflict over the course of the past couple of years, is that I knew what the left were going to say in relation to this. They have been going down an Israelophobic rabbit hole for a very long time now, making excuses for Islamist terrorism, both
led by
at home
Jeremy Corbyn
and abroad. None of that surprised me. It's amongst the sort of squishy middle of liberal left opinion.
The Rory Stewarts,
those sorts
the
of, the Alistair Campbells, it's those sorts of people who were not even particularly clued up, I would dare say, on this conflict before it actually flared up again over the course of the past few years, with that genocidal pogrom in Israel on October the 7th. The fact that it's become the common sense of that layer of society, who really do kind of permeate our cultural elite, our political class, what have you. They're not people just shouting on demonstrations. They have genuine clout and power. The fact that those people have imbibed all of these nonsensical prejudices against the state of Israel, and more broadly, dare I say, in some cases, a certain willingness to make excuses for, at the very least, anti-Semitic Islamist forces. It's not brand new, but it's the takeover of kind of polite society opinion by Israelophobia has been so total. I've found that particularly alarming.
And so much of this is PR, is Hamas, PR, what goes on in Gaza. And again, I do believe that an awful lot of what we're reading is completely untrue. And I don't in any way think that the Israeli government doesn't do bad things, and that there are IDF forces who occasionally, or even often, do bad things, as indeed have our forces in America and every other forces. And the mistakes are made, there's a fog of war, there will be atrocities committed, and that is awful, and people should be held to account. Got no issue with that. Do I think that Israel is carrying out a genocide in Gaza, is firing indiscriminately on civilians trying to get food aid? No, I think that's an absolute lie, and it doesn't even make sense. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. The facts simply don't back it up, and it amazes me how many people who are leading long-standing war correspondents at the BBC, top lawyers, naming no names, that they can't see it. I don't. And I don't think it's my lack of understanding of the issue. I think it really, I'm genuinely flabbergasted by it. I'm so embarrassed and ashamed for these people and for our country that this is the mindset that we are getting. And by the way, the whole time they're doing this, they think they're the good, nice people. That's the really scary bit. Especially if you think about what's happened in our own country. Obviously, there's the conflict abroad, and the fact that they're not siding with the Middle East embattled democracy is striking. But at the same time, even in this country, we've seen an explosion of anti-Semitism, very loosely dressed up as opposition to the state of Israel. This is the biggest kind of upsurge in racism, often quite violent racism, that I've certainly ever seen. And yet the supposed anti-racists are not only just turning a blind eye, they're often making excuses for it. I don't know how anyone can go to sleep at night when with that going on in their own society and being so blinkered by it. I mean, again, when everyone said never again, I thought we were supposed to mean it this time. But anyway, 12:26 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Going to get to your calls. Lots coming in talking about the Middle East, but also those Deliveroo, Uber Eats and Just Eat delivery drivers who are actually channel migrants, just got off a boat quite literally hours earlier before being able to work illegally, earning hundreds of pounds a week, not paying tax on it, while we're paying for their accommodation. I know, I'm as thrilled about it as you are. To get in touch, 0344 499 1000 is the number to call.
a brilliant man put it to me last week that there are three Donald Trumps in Donald Trump's mind. There's the winner, the deal maker, and the peacemaker. And I think he thinks with this strike he may just be able to get away with being all three in the end.
Is there a loser in that? Could he lose out on this?
Well, he hasn't really lost so far, so you should bet against him. But I do think this action could have repercussions that could spin out of control very, very quickly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:29 is the time. Coming up very soon. Going to talk to Lord McKinley, Craig McKinley, as was me, still Craig McKinley, really, former Tory MP. First up, though, let's get to your calls. I'm going to get a lot more time for calls as well in the next half hour. Coming in thick and fast on Iran, on the delivery drivers. Let's talk to Mark in Lincolnshire, first of all, on what's going on in the Middle East. Mark, what do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia, me duck.
You me duck me. Good afternoon, you. What do you want to say, my love?
Yeah, it's just, as far as I'm concerned, the UK just needs to wind its neck in on all this stuff, to be honest. We couldn't have pulled off what the Americans did at the weekend.
No one else could. No, they're the only country that have those bombs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to give you some context, our total military aircraft stands at 664. The Americans stands at 14,483.
Yeah. That's why we're their mates.
Their closest rivals, Russia, for just over 4,000.
Well, that's why we're their friends.
Well, exactly, So, yeah, I just think...
But when you say we should wind our neck in, what do you mean? We haven't been involved. We haven't even tried to even take sides on this and having it, what Kemi Bade not called moral clarity. What do you mean by wind our neck in?
I just think we're a little dog barking in a big dog war.
Right. It's not our problem. Come on, be honest. Is it? It's not our problem. It's their problem. It's not our problem.
No, it is our problem because America are doing the dirty work for everybody. So are Israel, I think we just need to be thankful for them.
Yeah.
And just kind of, do what support we can do for them.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to sort of, put our jets in the air. I mean, we did protect Israel when they had missile attacks from Iran back in April last year, wasn't it? And I'm really proud that we did that. It was defensive action. We don't need to be involved in every war going on, but I think we should have moral clarity on whose side we're on.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Starmer, the Labour government, we're always going to be like this over this kind of thing. Anytime Israel's involved with anything, because, the anti-Semitism is just rife within that party at the end of the day. So
there is that. There is that, Mark. Thank you very much. That's interesting. Let's get some of your texts and tweets and a call on Channel Migrants working as delivery drivers, Just Eat, Uber Eats, basically within hours of arriving in the UK, taxpayers funding their housing at the same time. And so that's the front page of The Sun, so there, that story. Jude says, I've never used either. People have become too lazy to cook or collect their own food. Yeah, that's a good point, Jude, but I'm not sure tackles the issue. Keith says, so they don't need passports as proof they can work legally? I had to give passport details for jobs in the past. This doesn't sound right. No, exactly. Basically, a driver can register, goes through all the checks, and then they can basically subcontract to anyone else. So rather makes a mockery of the system, doesn't it? Steve says, shut down Uber Eats and Deliveroo or anyone else hiring these illegals, as they must know they're channel migrants and they're not checking any ID or right to work, plus paying them in cash in hand, so avoiding national insurance payments and any tax. This is the thing. If there was a clear punishment, that would make a difference, wouldn't it? Maggie says it's not on. They're everywhere in the UK, in small towns and cities. And Ruth says many people who object to illegal immigration still use Uber Eats. Just stop giving them your money. I imagine they will find another way of making money. Hugh says let's ask Deliveroo and Just Eat UK to justify breaking employment laws without passing the buck. And presumably, says Chris, if these migrants are working legally, they will be paying taxes on their wages so they can contribute to their own accommodation. I don't think they are. I hate to tell you that. Let's go to the phone lines, 0344 499 1000. Sam is on the line in Warwickshire. Sam, you want to have your say on this issue?
Hi. How are you doing? Good, are you all right?
Very well indeed. Great to have you on the show. What do you want to say?
Good, yeah. I almost want to phone in every day, to be honest with you. But
you should.
This one particularly hurt me. So it's about the working, the illegal immigrants just coming over and working. I know that the government have the manpower to deal with this. My wife and I run a small business together, and during lockdown we closed down. We work in schools. We closed down, couldn't go out there at all, couldn't do anything. Anyway, we obviously claimed furlough. After the furlough ended, suddenly had HMRC all over us claiming that we've worked. We said, what are you talking about? We haven't. They said, you posted online. You put some posts online. I said, you've got to be kidding me. Like, we put about 4 posts a week. They said, yep, that's working. We want 10 grand back off you. It's like, well, hold on. We haven't been working for the last 2 years or whatever it was, year and a half. So they sent 7 of their bigwigs onto us. I've never experienced anything like it. We're a husband and wife team. We've got three young children at home. We took it as far as we could. We took it to tribunal. And they had 7 people, 3 of them chief execs at the bloody... excuse me. No,
I think you're allowed to say bloody at this point, mate.
3 of them who must be on, big fat cat 6-figure salaries against me and my wife. No solicitor. We didn't have a solicitor. Took us to court. So I know personally that they have the manpower to deal with it. So why are they not going after these multi-billion-pound companies who are clearly, just allowing them to get away with it? It drives me around the...
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that was always the thing where people had about, the idea that big companies like the Googles and the Starbucks, they have lunch with, the tax man to discuss what sort of tax they're willing to pay. You get these big companies like that, and they don't get dealt with the same way the rest of us get dealt with. As you say, it's happening. Other people's pointing it. It's happening in plain sight. They know it's happening. They can see it, and they just don't care, and they don't do anything about it. But they go after the easy targets like you. Presumably, you'd post it online because you're just desperately trying to keep the business could be afloat. By the way, given that we know there are loads and loads and loads of companies that basically carried on working throughout COVID and took the furlough, I know someone. I actually know a woman who found out by accident when she looked at her husband's bank statement to fill in some form, with his permission, and realised he'd been on furlough the entire way through COVID officially, but he'd gone to work every day and he hadn't flagged it to her because the viewers they wanted to. The boss basically took tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of pounds of public money, and did actually pay, and his staff were all working, and basically everyone was told shush, and if anyone speaks up, of course, they're worried that they're going to be prosecuted, even though that wasn't their choice, and they didn't get paid anymore, but also that the company will close down, they lose their job. So they don't go after those companies.
No, of course they don't. No, I mean, I've heard of stories, I don't know anyone personally, but people are starting businesses, taking out the loan, and then shutting down, and they're starting a business. We didn't do anything. We couldn't go into schools. We didn't do anything. It came down to the law, and it was, I've got to say, the judge was very good, but it came down to the law, what constitutes work. And this was, it was a fine line. What constitutes work? When we work, we are on social media. We are firing out 20 to 25 a day. Yeah. We went down to 3 or 4 a week. It was things like keep your pecker up, keep your chin up.
Yeah, that's not work.
That's not work.
No, Sam, I'm sure everyone listening is just as outraged. Again, the petty, jobs-worthy people. They go after people like you and your wife who are legitimate, but not the actual criminals. Sam, my heart goes out to you. Thank you so much for your call. Really appreciate that. 12:36 is the time. We're going to take a break. I have a funny thing that Lord McKinley is going to have thoughts on that. Someone who campaigned against a lot of these lockdown and furlough rules. He's coming up next. Stay tuned. We'll take more of your calls before 1 o'clock, I promise, as well. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Delighted to say that Lord McKinley, Craig McKinley, joins us now. He's a Conservative peer, former Tory MP, and joins us on the line to talk about, well, lots of the big stories of the news. Very, very good afternoon to you.
Good to see you again, Julia.
Apologies, coming to you a bit late, but I'm sure you were interested in the call we just had from Sam and talking about how, HMRC, and as you know, they'll go after small businesses, legitimate businesses. Oh, you claim some furlough cash, but they think they shouldn't. Doesn't sound to me like they were working, posting full tweets over. It doesn't sound like a job to me. But at the same time, not going after channel migrants, illegally working, sometimes within hours of arriving in the country, living in taxpayer-funded accommodation, an asylum hotel or private accommodation, basically operating on sort of subcontracted contracts for the Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Just Eat and the others to ride around delivering food. Happening in plain sight, parking their bikes outside the asylum hotels. It's really obvious what's going on. They're not allowed to work. Everyone knows they're not allowed to work. People running these things know they're not to work. HMRC investigate people like Sam and his wife and don't go after Uber Eats and Just Eat and Deliveroo. What's going on?
Well, if you employ an illegal immigrant on a PAYE type business, then the fine can be up to £20,000 per
not enough
employee. But I mean, that's fairly lumpy amount. I mean, frankly, they should be doing exactly the same to these delivery companies, because this whole gig economy is now, frankly, a racket. I mean, this was alerted to me actually some years ago, and I did pass it on to the powers that be through the Home Office. Yeah. There was an employee in Parliament said to me, do you know what? I live around the corner from an asylum hotel, and there are these Deliveroo, Just Eat, Uber Eats bikes all over the place. So, I mean, this is in total plain sight. Now, I mean, I could think of some means of extracting who the illegals are out of this, because they must be operating through common bank accounts. Yeah. And I'm sure they're claiming it's probably family members, friends members. Yeah. They're giving the details, but also this right to substitution is completely open.
I mean, that's the problem, is it? So they exploit a loophole. So someone is given an account. They have to go through and prove that they can work there. But so the legitimate account holder is allowed to sublet the work, and even though signing up for an account is free. So one group has 20,000 members, and they've got dozens of posts a day advertising the accounts. We're requiring no documents whatsoever. So an undercover Sun reporter posing as an arrival from Afghanistan was offered an account 10 minutes after signing up. And when asked if having no documents was a problem, one Deliveroo dealer, as he called himself, said, "You will not be caught, Allah willing." I mean, so they top up, they get cash. I mean, presumably presumably a cut is taken when the money is paid by these companies. But again, these companies must know, because when someone has they've got these accounts, they must know that their money is going, huge sums of money are going to one bank account that couldn't possibly be one Deliveroo driver unless he had 40 different bikes and was working 365 days a year, 24/7.
Well, I find it hard to believe there must be some sort of Nelsonian blind eye going on within these companies, because it doesn't take the brains of a rocket scientist to actually.
The brains of you mean the brains of an illegal migrant, because they're all rocket scientists. But I mean, did you get that memo?
We scratch our heads and wondering why Britain is such an attractive destination for illegal migrants. And when you're given a nice hotel, I understand, 4-star hotels. I've got a friend who's tried to book up a hotel that he uses all the time near Heathrow Airport for work, 4-star, very nice, and told, no, sorry, you can't take these bookings anymore because we've been taken over by the Home Office.
I thought we were told, certainly under your lot, the Tories, that no more 4-star hotels would be used.
Well, I'm afraid this was a 4-star hotel.
They've redesignated themselves. They're identifying as a 3-star.
Only a few months ago. So it's obviously happening, and people are coming to the UK with a very nice accommodation, and then the opportunity to earn, whatever you earn, less than 20% tax you've got to pay someone, plus 10% cut for using their anonymous ID. I can but guess. Yeah. But just on the back of what some of your previous person said, I mean, I was on the Public Accounts Committee for some 3 years. It's a good committee. It does try and unpeel the layers of mess that's happening.
Oh, the Public Accounts Committee, under whoever's chairing it, has actually embarrassed the nation, the national government on many an occasion.
No, absolutely. No, just let me get. I mean, as you know, I'm chartered accountant, chartered tax advisor. In days of old, good old days, you had a local tax office, and the tax inspector might have belonged to the local Rotary Club. He walked up the high street getting his sandwich. He was part, or he or she, part and parcel of the local community, and they could see the dodgy ones. But now the HMRC offices are in the middle of nowhere on an industrial estate in some vast building. They have absolutely
and everyone's
no
working from home on Zoom.
And probably on home. I can actually bear that out when I'm in my practice. I've been on the phone waiting a very long time to get through to somebody, and you can hear the dog barking and all the rest of it going on in the background. But anyway, that aside, they are not interacting with people anymore. So on any decent high street now, you will have a multitude of frauds going on. And I'll let you guess.
The barber shops, the nail bars, the car washes.
So, number one, they're not ringing up the take, so there's a VAT fraud. They're not ringing up the take, so there is an income tax or corporation tax fraud. If they do have staff on payroll legitimately, they're paying them a small amount legitimately through payroll, and the rest of it in all this cash that's not being rung up for VAT and income tax purposes. And then those employees are claiming universal credit based on a low PAYE. And this is happening on a wholesale basis across every single high street in the UK, but HMRC are not looking at these. I know they're only the small end of things, but if you were to do a few, I bet the old message would go through the local Facebook community that HMRC are bearing down on this sort of stuff. We have a virtually Wild West Britain in some of these respects, and loophole after loophole after loophole is being exploited.
And again, all that tax that's not coming in, and then the rest of us having to pay more tax to pay for everything.
Well,
you know what Tony Blair would say the solution was, don't you? Digital ID cards.
Well, yeah, there is that, but I'm afraid they'll find a loophole around that.
Of course they will. They've got ID cards across most of Europe. That hasn't solved the problem there.
Well, I think we have a multitude of problems in the UK. Number one, we're giving them a very, very good accommodation. Number two, it's very easy to work. And number three, actually, is so easy to work, possibly because of the ID card lack of in the UK. But as I say, there'd be a loophole. Cash exists, and as you can see, when you have your car wash, you see the barber shops. I mean, I'm afraid it doesn't need.
I don't think there are that many men who need their hair cut that often. That's what I say. I want to get to the topic.
You go through a little village. And you've got 4 barber shops have sprung up over the last year.
I desperately want to get to 2 more topics. I want to mention this Qatari camel herder. It's just extraordinary. Nasser Al Garanki, he's been jailed for 7 years, not enough, for sexually assaulting a woman at a heart clinic. For some reason, no one can understand why a 27-year-old Qatari camel herder had travelled to Britain for treatment for a rare heart condition. I mean, I'm assuming camel herding pays very well in Qatar. But I thought they had pretty good hospitals in Qatar. That's why all the Hamas leadership were there. But he tried to rape a woman in a hospital in Chelsea. He then blamed it on in his defence in court as he's had little interaction with women in his home country. Only woman he was ever alone with was his mother. We're not allowed to spend time with women otherwise. And I don't know whether he thinks that sexually assaulting his mother in a bathroom would be normal behaviour. But that was the defence given. And the thing that strikes me about this is, A, what the hell was this guy doing in our country? B, 7 years ain't enough for what he done. So C, crucially, why is it when we point out things like the key cultural differences between people from different countries, certain countries, particularly in the Middle East, others who come to this country and don't have the same values and attitudes, particularly towards women when they come here, why is it if I point that out, I'm a bigot, but if his defence lawyer points it out, it's a legitimate cultural difference?
Well, this is the whole thing. I'm afraid cultural differences just are almost insurmountable. Yet you raise the right questions. What was he doing here? I think Qatar has got quite a generous health system that if you can't have the treatment locally, they may actually put you on a plane to come to the UK and have it done. That's not uncommon in some of these oil-rich countries. I wonder where Qatar got all its money from us, because we're too stupid to mine our own gas and oil. But that's a question for another day. But yeah, these cultural differences are difficult to bridge. And you're quite right. It is women who bear the brunt of this, because the divide is a large one, and the freedoms, thank heavens, that we have for all of us, including women in the UK, have been long won, evolved over a very long time. But here we are, willing to almost give that away on the altar of cultural correctness and acceptance and all of those other good things. I'm sorry to say, Julia, it does not work. And you only have to look at the broader figures, and the Home Office have been pushed into actually having
dragged, kicking and screaming.
They're going to have to publish them in the future, but the figures that we do know exist, there is a disproportionate amount of certain cultures and countries that are at the heart of many of these sexual offences.
And by a huge percentage. Well, just finally, I want to get you this extraordinary situation where 108 Labour MPs, including 12 committee chairs, have basically, they said they're going to sign a motion, an amendment to the government's welfare reform bill, which in my view doesn't go far enough in itself, but they're going to try and basically stop it in its entirety. It includes 12 committee chairs, so we're talking about senior MPs, but it completely blows a hole in the side of the Labour working majority of 165 MPs. First of all, your reaction to that rebellion from Labour MPs, and secondly, will this mean that the welfare reform can't go through?
Oh, well, I'd like to see a good rebellion. It'd be a really good one.
As a serial rebel.
Well, not really. I did it at the right time for the right moment.
I agree.
And if they feel that this is one that they've got to take a stand on, I don't agree with them, because I think we have got a serious problem with the escalation of benefits, which just only seems to go in one direction. I've said for many years, if you can get our benefit system right, then we're well on the track to actually solving a lot of problems in this country. Problems of worklessness, problems of mental health issues.
Maybe these people could go and get jobs as Uber Eats drivers and delivery drivers.
Well,
apparently there's lots going.
Yeah, problem of the pressure that we seem to perpetually have of importing more and more people under legitimate visas for jobs that we don't seem to be able to fill in the UK. So get benefits right. I think we're well on track to do the right thing. But unfortunately, amongst the Labour Party, and I've worked with them for many years, some of them believe absolutely in universal basic income. And they can see that the gradual evolution of our benefit system is inexorably going towards creating a universal basic income.
Yeah, and that's where they go. Can I ask you, as somebody, look, everyone will know you found the show regularly when you were a Conservative MP, and then you left the Commons and you decided not to stand for election again after you just suffered the most awful infection and led to you having the amputation of all four of your extremities of your limbs. I mean, that is a disability no one would ever question. I know different people can respond differently to these things. You seem to have just the most incredible strength of character and will to continue life and in public life. What do you make, though, of the claims, the idea that we are a uniquely disabled and sick society that needs to have something like 1 in 8 working age people on disability benefits, when you yourself have what no one would question as a physical disability?
I don't believe we're more ill as a nation than any other, well, quite frankly, any other country on this planet, seemingly. We have a higher proportion of people on long-term sickness, on PIP, on disability benefits than anybody else. The reason we've got a lot of people on PIP assessment, I mean, it even goes down to people who are alcoholics, that are obese, all sorts of conditions that you wouldn't call would be traditional full disability issues. Anxiety. If you claim that you're feeling suicidal, that is a guaranteed route into getting your PIP assessment. There are apparently training sessions online that people can actually watch and use the words that you need to get the golden ticket at the end of the day. We're being taken for absolute fools. You know, I've got 4 of these. And I go to work every single day of the week. I get on the tube, I get on the train, and I get through the network and I go to work. Okay, I'm not going to be a builder anytime soon, but I certainly can manage the cerebral jobs that I task myself to do. I'm also in practice as a chartered accountant for the 4th day of the week, that if I'm not in Parliament, and I'm also the director of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. So I actually hold down 3 sort of jobs. I could do it. For heaven's sake, Britain, get off your backside and do it again.
Craig McKinley, Lord McKinley, Conservative peer, thank you so much. Always so great to have you on the show. Thank you. I'm going to get a response to Tom Slater just after a quick break. We're just going to try and squeeze in 2 calls, hopefully, for the top of the hour, what you want to have your say on. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense.
was a brilliant man put it to me last week that there are three Donald Trumps in Donald Trump's mind. There's the winner, the deal maker, and the peacemaker. And I think he thinks with this strike he may just be able to get away with being all three in the end.
Is there a loser in that? Could he lose out on this?
Well, he hasn't really lost so far, so you should never bet against him. But I do think this action could have repercussions that could spin out of control very, very quickly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. This is Talk the Home Common Sense. 12:55 is the time. Quick reaction from Tom Slater to what Lord Craig McLean was saying. Right, look, basically, everyone back to work. I've got 2 amputated limbs and I managed to work. We don't need to pay more and more people on benefits.
No, exactly. I mean, if he can do it, surely anyone can do it. I mean, it's clearly gone far beyond people who are seriously disabled. There's clearly an issue of combination of perverse incentives and also a culture which is encouraging people via a very expanded idea of mental ill health
to think that they're mentally ill.
Absolutely. So in a way, there's not even there are of course people who do take advantage of the system very explicitly. There's also a lot of people who are just trapped in it, and I just don't understand where the sympathy is for those people, because it really is no life to
but
exist
parents,
in this
it's
kind
teachers,
of system.
it's everybody else saying like, oh yes, oh poor you, as opposed to okay, that's been bad. Get up, get on with life. Like you're here, you're just here once, guys. Don't make a mess of it. Let's talk to Grenville, who's on the line. He's in Canterbury. Grenville, you wanted to have your say about these migrant workers working for delivery companies. What do you want to say?
Hello. Good. Where am I? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Right. No. I saw it on your X comments. I took a delivery yesterday in Canterbury. From Uber Eats.
Yeah.
I do it regularly, and every time I get a delivery here, I'm just outside of Canterbury in Stirling Minutes. There are different drivers coming every time. Yeah. They'll arrive on a moped or even a car, just to bring 1 or 2 bags of groceries. But yesterday there were only 3 bags, and 2 individuals turned up. And I thought they were both together, one in a small car, like a Fiat, and one on a bike.
Yeah.
They didn't know each other. And one of them, clearly, when I went to give them a tip, couldn't speak a word of English.
Yeah. How have you got that job? How did you fill out that form?
Well, yes, but when I gave him the tip, he didn't even seem to know what the currency was, which was even more astonishing. So we're on track between the southern coast of Deal and into London, and we know of boatloads of people coming in. No control over them at all, and I wondered what sort of control there is over the people they hire to deliver these.
Clearly, virtually none. Very frustratingly, Grenville, I have to let this go because we've hit 12:58. Jamal in Leeds, sorry we didn't get to you, but a very good point that a lot of these deliveries aren't legal, but they aren't being stopped. I'm sure that Ian Collins, who has just joined us in the studio, will be tackling this issue.
I've never delivered anything in my life. What are you accusing me of here? I haven't even got a moped, Julia.
But it is just extraordinary, though, isn't it? It is this.
But it's also what everybody kind of sort of knew, and then you hear it said, and you think, but how does that even happen? Even by those sort of delivery standards, you might think there's some documentation you've got to fill in.
Well, apparently not, because they just outsource everything, and it's much cheaper for the companies, and everyone thinks they make a benefit from the people being payless, when actually what it does, it damages our economy and provides another draw, as Tom and I've been saying, to people coming on those boats.
Yeah, 100%.
What else are you going to be talking about, my lovely?
Obviously, we're talking about the Donald Trump. Have you heard him drop the F-bomb in his little moment?
Has he?
He's got
No,
very,
I missed
very
this.